The notification chimed on my phone at 3:17 a.m., jolting me awake from a fitful sleep. Unusual account activity detected. Those 4 words would mark the beginning of the end of the life I thought I had built. I squinted at the screen, the harsh blue light illuminating the empty space beside me where Nathan should have been. I sat up, suddenly wide awake, my heart racing as I opened the banking app. The balance that should have read 127,463.92, our savings for the new house, the future we had planned together, now displayed a pitiful 212.47. I blinked hard, certain I was still dreaming, but the numbers didn't change. My trembling fingers scrolled through the transaction history. A single transfer made just hours ago to an account I didn't recognize. "Nathan!" I called out, my voice echoing through our apartment. Only silence answered me. His side of the closet stood open, half empty, a few wire hangers swinging slightly in the draft from the air vent. The bathroom counter, usually cluttered with his expensive grooming products, was bare. A cold realization seeped into my bones. He hadn't gone for a late-night drive or to meet a friend. He was gone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted, my fingers fumbling over the screen. "Nathan, where are you? What's happening with our account?" No response. I tried his mother, Diane. No answer there either. My hands shook as I pulled on a sweatshirt and jeans, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. If he wasn't answering me, I'd go to him. The night was unseasonably cold for late September, the streets of Green Hill empty and glistening with recent rain. I drove on autopilot to Diane's sprawling Tudor in the historic district, the house Nathan had grown up in, the house where she still treated him like her precious little boy at 35. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the familiar wrought iron gates. Both Nathan's Tesla and Diane's Mercedes were parked in the circular driveway. I pounded on the heavy oak door, not caring that it was nearly 4 a.m. After what felt like an eternity, lights flickered on inside, and Diane opened the door, wrapped in an expensive silk robe, her silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed even at this hour. Her face, usually arranged in a mask of polite disdain when dealing with me, now showed open contempt. "What are you doing here at this ungodly hour, Rachel?" she asked, making no move to let me in. "Where's Nathan?" I demanded, trying to look past her into the house. "What's going on with our account?" A cold smile spread across her thin lips. "I think you should leave." "Not until I speak with my husband," I insisted, my voice rising. "I want to know why over $100,000, our money, was transferred out of our joint account in the middle of the night." "Your money?" Diane laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "My dear, that was Nathan's money. He earned it while you played at being a photographer, spending his hard-earned cash on your little hobby. My photography business, which had taken 5 years of tireless work to build into a respected studio that now employed 3 people, reduced to a little hobby in a single dismissive sentence." Classic Diane. "Let me talk to Nathan," I said through gritted teeth. "He doesn't want to see you." She moved to close the door, but I blocked it with my foot. "Diane, stop. This is between Nathan and me. Whatever issues we have, we can work them out." She hesitated, then called over her shoulder. "Nathan, your wife is making a scene." I heard his familiar footsteps before I saw him, and my heart lurched painfully in my chest. Nathan appeared behind his mother, his face unreadable, his normally warm brown eyes cold and distant. "Nathan?" My voice cracked. "What's happening? Why did you take our money?" "It's over, Rachel." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I've been trying to find the right way to tell you for months." "Months?" I echoed, disbelief washing over me. "And the right way was to clean out our account and disappear in the middle of the night?" He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, But his mother jumped in before he could respond. Nathan finally realized he deserves better than someone who's been using him as a meal ticket, Diane said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Someone who could actually support him, not drain him. Is that what you think? I asked Nathan, ignoring his mother. That I've been using you? He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. A gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. The money's going to be split fairly in the divorce. Half is yours, I know that. I just needed to. Protect it for now. Protect it? From me? Your wife of 7 years? The betrayal cut deeper with each word. You never appreciated what Nathan gave you, Diane interjected. The lifestyle, the connections, the opportunities. You were never good enough for him, and now he's finally seen it. Mom, please, Nathan said weakly, but he made no real attempt to stop her. You never deserved him anyway, Diane continued, her eyes gleaming with triumph. He needs someone from our world, someone who understands our values, our traditions. Someone you approve of, you mean? I shot back. Someone you can control, just like you control him. Nathan's jaw tightened. That's enough, Rachel. This isn't about my mother. This is about us. And it's not working. It hasn't been working for a long time. And I'm just finding out about this now? Along with finding out that you stole our money? I was shouting now, past caring who heard me. Were you ever going to talk to me? Or was the plan always to disappear and let your lawyer do the talking? It's complicated, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. It's not complicated, Diane cut in. Nathan has realized his mistake and is correcting it. He's coming home, where he belongs. Home? He's 35 years old. Our apartment is his home. Not anymore, Diane said with finality. Now, I suggest you leave before we call the police. The police? I laughed bitterly. And report what? That the wife you're trying to discard showed up asking why her husband emptied their bank account? Please call them. I'd love to explain the situation. Nathan stepped forward then, placing himself between his mother and me. Rachel, please, go home. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. Everything will be handled fairly. Fairly? I echoed, my voice breaking. There's nothing fair about this, Nathan. Nothing. I looked past him to Diane, who was watching with barely concealed satisfaction. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I had been blind to for years. She had never loosened her grip on him, and he had never truly wanted her to. You know what? Keep the money, I said, suddenly feeling exhausted. If it means that, much to you. If it's worth throwing away everything we built together, then keep it. But don't you dare pretend this is about fairness, or what's right. I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Nathan one last time. 7 years, Nathan. 7 years, and you couldn't even break up with me to my face. As I walked back to my car, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The elegant Tudor house loomed behind me, its windows staring like blank eyes. I had entered that house countless times over the years, always feeling like an outsider, always trying to earn a place in a family that had decided long ago I would never belong. My phone buzzed as I started the car. A text from Nathan. I'm sorry it ended this way. Sorry it ended this way, as if the manner of our ending was the problem, not the betrayal itself. As if finding myself suddenly alone and nearly penniless was just an unfortunate circumstance, like rain on a wedding day. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat without responding and pulled away from the curb. As I drove through the quiet streets of Greenhill, past the exclusive shops and restaurants where Diane had always made me feel like an interloper, past the park where Nathan had proposed, past the bakery where we'd tasted wedding cake samples, I felt something hard forming in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just grief or anger, it was resolve. I had built a life once before I met Nathan, created something from nothing when no one believed I could. My photography business might be small in Diane's eyes, but it was mine. I had clients who valued my work, employees who depended on me. Nathan and Diane might have taken my money, but they hadn't taken my ability to earn it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, the sun was fully up. A new day. The first day of whatever came next. As I rode the elevator to the 11th floor, I made a silent promise to myself. I would rebuild. And this time, I would build something that no one could take away from me. I unlocked the door to an apartment that already felt different, emptier. Even though Nathan had only taken his clothes and personal items, the space that had been ours was now just mine, and the silence was deafening. On the kitchen counter, where we'd shared countless meals and conversations, his wedding ring sat like a small, mocking monument to everything I'd lost. Beside it was a folded piece of paper, a handwritten note. I approached it cautiously, as if it might burn me. "Rachel," it read in Nathan's neat handwriting. "I know you won't understand this now, but someday you will. We've been growing apart for years. You've been so consumed with your business that there's no room for me anymore. Mom helped me see that we want different things in life. I'll always care about you, but it's better to end things now before we waste more time. The money is safe. You'll get your share once things are settled legally. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Nathan." I read the note twice, searching for something genuine, something that sounded like the man I had married. Instead, I heard Diane's voice in every word, saw her influence in every justification. I crumpled the note in my fist, a strange calm washing over me. In that moment, standing in the half-empty apartment with Nathan's dismissive explanation crushed in my hand, I realized something that would change everything. I had spent 7 years trying to be worthy of Nathan and his family's approval, never questioning whether they were worthy of mine. That ended today. I sat on the kitchen floor for what felt like hours, Nathan's crumpled note beside me, watching the sun climb higher in the sky through the large windows he had insisted we needed. "The light, Rachel," he'd said when we first viewed the apartment. "Think of the natural light for your photography." Now that light streamed in mercilessly, illuminating the half-empty spaces where his things had been. My phone had been buzzing incessantly. Calls from the studio. I was supposed to shoot the Morgans' anniversary portraits today. Texts from my assistant, Zoe, asking where I was. Emails from clients confirming upcoming sessions. The world outside was continuing as if nothing had happened, while mine had imploded. With robotic movements, I finally picked up my phone and texted Zoe. "Family emergency. Can you reschedule today's shoots? We'll explain later." Then I turned off my phone, unable to handle any more questions or concerns. I needed time to think, to process, to breathe. The apartment felt both suffocating and too large at once. Every corner held memories. The couch where we'd binge-watched shows on rainy Sundays. The dining table where we'd hosted dinner parties for his colleagues. The hallway where we'd hung a gallery of my favorite photographs from our travels. 7 years of life together, erased overnight with surgical precision. I forced myself to stand, legs shaky beneath me. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes were swollen from crying, dark, circles beneath them, my normally tidy brown hair a wild mess around my face. I looked like a stranger, or perhaps this haunted woman was the real me, finally emerging after years of trying to fit into the mold Nathan and Diane had created. The shower helped clear my head, hot water washing away tears until I could think more clearly. As I dried off, I realized I needed to take stock of my situation. The emotional inventory could wait. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with financially. Our apartment was in both our names, but the rent each month came from that joint account, the one that now held just over $200. My business account, thankfully separate, had about $7,000 in it, but most of that was already allocated for upcoming expenses, studio rent, equipment payments, Zoe's salary, and the part-time assistant we'd just hired. My personal checking account held less than $1,000. I'd always contributed my share to our joint account, believing we were building something together, never imagining I would need a financial backup plan for my marriage. The immediate reality hit me like a physical blow. I had less than 2 weeks before rent was due, barely enough to cover immediate expenses, and no access to the savings I'd spent years helping to build. Nathan's promise that I would get my share once things were settled legally offered little comfort. Divorce proceedings could take months, even years. I sat at my kitchen counter, forcing myself to make a list of immediate needs and actions. The precision of it, the act of writing things down, helped anchor me when I felt like I was drifting in an ocean of uncertainty. Call a lawyer, secure apartment change locks, check credit cards, other accounts, contact bank about fraudulent transfer, tell friends, family I stared at the last item longest. Telling people would make this real in a way I wasn't sure I could handle yet. How do you announce to the world that your husband abandoned you in the middle of the night and took all your money with him? How do you admit that the life you thought you had was built on a foundation of sand? My hand hovered over my phone. Who would I even call first? My parents were traveling in Europe, celebrating their retirement with a long-planned trip. My younger sister Meg was in her final year of medical school, stressed and overwhelmed with her own life. My closest friend Tara had moved across the country last year for a job opportunity. And the sad truth was, over the past few years, I'd let many friendships fade as I tried to integrate more fully into Nathan's world. His colleagues had become our dinner companions, his mother's social circle, our weekend obligations. I'd stepped further and further away from the relationships that had once sustained me, believing I was building a new life, never realizing I was isolating myself in the process. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I scrolled through contacts, looking for someone who might understand, someone who wouldn't judge. My finger paused over Ellie's name. We'd been close in college, roommates for 3 years, but had drifted apart after I started dating Nathan. She'd never particularly liked him, had warned me about his mama's boy tendencies, and I'd responded by seeing her less and less frequently. Our last real conversation had been almost 2 years ago, at her father's funeral. Before I could overthink it, I pressed call. The phone rang 4 times, and I was about to hang up when her familiar voice answered. "Rachel, is that really you?" "Ellie," I said, and then found I couldn't continue, my throat closing around the words I needed to say. "Rachel, are you okay?" The concern in her voice broke something in me, and suddenly I was sobbing, ugly heaving cries that made it impossible to speak. "Rachel, you're scaring me. What's happening? Where are you?" "He's gone," I finally managed to choke out. "Nathan's gone. He took everything." There was a brief silence on the other end. "I'm coming over," Ellie said firmly. "You still in that fancy apartment downtown?" I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. "Yes," I whispered. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Hang tight." True to her word, Ellie arrived exactly 30 minutes later, arms loaded with grocery bags. I buzzed her up, suddenly self-conscious about my appearance, about the state of the apartment, about everything. When I opened the door, she took one look at me and set the bags down to pull me into a fierce hug. "Oh, honey," she said softly, and the simple kindness in her voice nearly broke me again. Ellie took charge with a quiet efficiency that reminded me why we'd been such good friends. She unpacked the groceries, comfort foods, wine, chocolate, and made us both strong cups of coffee while I sat at the counter, trying to piece together a coherent explanation of what had happened. So let me get this straight, she said when I finished my story. Your husband and his mother conspired to empty your joint savings account of over $100,000 in the middle of the night, and then had the audacity to tell you that you never deserved him anyway? Put so baldly, it sounded both absurd and horrifying. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. And now you're basically broke until you can get a lawyer to help you recover your half of the money? That's about the size of it, I confirmed, a strange calm settling over me as I articulated the reality of my situation. Ellie took a long sip of her coffee, then set the mug down with determination. Rachel, I say this with all the love in the world. Nathan is a spineless mama's boy coward, and you are so much better off without him. A startled laugh escaped me. Tell me how you really feel, Elle. I'm serious, she continued, her eyes intense. I never said anything because you seemed happy and it wasn't my place. But that man has been under his mother's thumb your entire relationship. Remember when we were supposed to go to that concert in Chicago for your birthday? And suddenly he couldn't go because his mother needed him to attend some charity gala. I did remember. I'd ended up going to the concert with Ellie instead, and we'd had a fantastic time. I'd almost forgotten that Nathan was supposed to have been there. Or what about when you got that amazing opportunity to photograph that destination wedding? In Bali? And he convinced you to turn it down because it conflicted with his mother's annual summer soiree? He said it wasn't worth the time away for what they were paying, I said weakly. But even as the words left my mouth, I heard how hollow they sounded. Ellie reached across the counter and took my hand. Rachel, I know this hurts like hell, right? Now. And I'm not saying this to kick you when you're down, but maybe, just maybe, when you get through the initial shock of all this, you might find that Nathan leaving is the best thing that could have happened to you. I stared at her, wanting to protest, to defend the man I'd loved, the marriage I'd believed in, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself wondering if she might be right. The money, though, I said after a moment. Even if I'm better off without him, I still need to live. I still need to pay rent, keep my business running. And we'll figure that out, Ellie said firmly. First thing tomorrow, we're getting you a lawyer. Tonight we're ordering takeout, drinking wine, and remembering who Rachel Bennett was before she became Rachel Winters. I'm not sure I remember her, I admitted quietly. Ellie squeezed my hand. I do. She was fierce, talented, and didn't take crap from anyone, especially not entitled rich boys and their controlling mothers. She's still in there, Rach. And I have a feeling we're about to see her make one hell of a comeback. For the first time since seeing that notification on my phone at 3:17 a.m., I felt a tiny flicker of something other than despair, a small, tentative spark of determination. Maybe Ellie was right. Maybe somewhere beneath the shock and betrayal, beneath the woman who had learned to navigate Nathan's world with practiced smiles and careful words, the real Rachel was waiting to emerge. As we opened a bottle of wine, and Ellie pulled up the menu from our favorite Thai restaurant on her phone, I found myself staring at the crumpled note on the counter, at Nathan's wedding ring still sitting beside it. With a sudden decisive movement, I swept both into the trash. Well? Said Ellie with an approving nod. I'd say that's a pretty good start. Morning light filtered through the blinds as I stared at the ceiling of my studio apartment. It had been 3 days since Ellie had helped me move out of the place I'd shared with Nathan. The tiny apartment belonged to Ellie's cousin who was working overseas for a year. A temporary refuge while I sorted out the mess my life had become. The space was cramped but functional. A fold-out couch that doubled as my bed, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. My photography equipment took up one entire corner, cases stacked neatly against the wall. I'd had to leave most of my belongings behind, taking only essentials and my professional gear. We'll get the rest later, Ellie had promised. When you have a lawyer and the locks have been changed. I'd spent yesterday meeting with Vivian Torres, an attorney specializing in divorce cases who came highly recommended by one of Ellie's colleagues. She'd listened intently as I explained the situation, her expression growing increasingly concerned as I detailed the emptied account, Nathan's note, and Diane's involvement. What Nathan and his mother did was not just morally reprehensible, Vivian had said, tapping her pen against her notepad. It may cross the line into illegal territory. Emptying a joint account without your knowledge or consent, especially with this timing, could be considered dissipation of marital assets. What does that mean? I'd asked. It means a judge could order him to not only return your half, but potentially pay additional penalties. She'd given me a level look. But Rachel, I need to be honest with you. These cases can take time, and Nathan comes from a wealthy family with connections. They will likely hire an aggressive attorney who will fight tooth and nail. I'd nodded, already expecting as much. I just want what's fair, what I worked for. And we'll fight for that, Vivian had assured me. I've already filed for an emergency hearing regarding the funds, and we're requesting temporary spousal support given the circumstances. In the meantime, though, you need to think about how you're going to support yourself. Now, lying in the unfamiliar bed, I contemplated that question. My business was successful, but in a growth phase where much of the profit was being reinvested. I had clients and upcoming bookings, but with studio rent, equipment payments, and my assistants' salaries, the margins were tighter than I'd like to admit. For the first time since starting my photography business, I found myself questioning my professional choices. Had I been foolish to expand so quickly? To hire Zoe full-time? To lease the larger studio space? Nathan had always encouraged these moves, assuring me that we had the joint savings as a safety net. Had he been setting me up for failure all along? Knowing he would eventually pull the rug out from under me? The thought sent a chill through me. I sat up, reaching for the journal Ellie had given me. Write it all down, she'd said. The good, the bad, the ugly. Get it out of your head and onto the page. I flipped past the angry, tear-stained entries of the previous 2 days to a fresh page and began to write. Not about Nathan this time, but about myself and my business. Why did I become a photographer? The question seemed simple, but as I wrote, memories flooded back. I remembered receiving my first camera at 16, an old film model my father had found at a garage sale. I recalled the thrill of developing my first roll of film in the community college darkroom, watching images emerge like magic in the chemical bath. Photography hadn't been just a hobby, or even just a career choice. It had been a calling, a way of seeing the world and preserving moments that might otherwise be lost to time. Before Nathan, before trying to fit into Diane's upper crust world, photography had been the thing that made me feel most alive, most myself. I continued writing, moving from the past to the present, evaluating my business with clear eyes perhaps for the first time. The truth was, Rachel Bennett Photography was doing well, better than well. Yes, I was reinvesting profits, but that was a choice, not a necessity. I'd been booking more weddings than I could personally handle, which was why I'd hired help in the first place. My corporate clients, local businesses that needed product photography, headshots, and marketing images, provided steady, reliable income. The studio space, while expensive, had already attracted new clients who were impressed by the professional setting. I had built something valuable, something with potential, something entirely mine. Why then had I allowed Nathan and Diane to make me feel like my business was just a cute side project? Why had I internalized their narrative that I was financially dependent on Nathan when the reality was quite different? I thought back to the early days of our relationship. I'd been working as a photographer's assistant then, learning the business side while developing my portfolio. Nathan had been impressed by my passion, had even seemed to admire my determination to build a career doing what I loved. When had that changed? When had his supportive comments about my artistic eye and entrepreneurial spirit transformed into subtle digs about the financial practicality of my career? When had Diane's begrudging acknowledgement of my little studio become the yardstick by which I measured my professional worth? A memory surfaced, a dinner at Diane's house about 3 years into our marriage. She'd been showing off her newly redecorated living room to some friends, and one of them had commented on a striking black and white photograph hanging above the fireplace. "It's beautiful," the woman had said. "Is it an original Mapplethorpe?" Before Diane could answer, Nathan had jumped in proudly. "Actually, Rachel took that. She's quite talented." The woman had turned to me with genuine interest. "You're a photographer? Do you show your work in galleries?" I'd begun, but Diane had cut me off with a tinkling laugh. "Oh, Rachel mostly does family portraits and weddings. It's more of a, what do they call it? A side hustle. It's a full-time business, actually," I'd corrected gently. "I have a studio downtown." Diane had given me that tight smile I knew so well. "Yes, and it's adorable how dedicated you are to it. Thank goodness Nathan has a real career to fall back on, though. Those artistic ventures can be so unpredictable." The conversation had moved on, but something had shifted in that moment. I'd seen myself through Diane's eyes, not a professional building a legitimate business, but a dilettante playing at having a career while her son provided the real financial stability. Worse, I'd started to internalize that view. I'd begun downplaying my accomplishments, prefacing announcements about new clients or successful projects with qualifiers. "It's not a big deal, but," or "it's nothing compared to Nathan's work, but." Sitting in the tiny apartment that was now my temporary home, I felt a surge of anger, not just at Nathan and Diane, but at myself for allowing their perception to become my reality. I had built a viable business doing work I loved, work I was good at. I had clients who valued my skills enough to pay for them. I had employees who depended on me. And I had let myself believe I was somehow less than, somehow dependent, somehow not enough. I closed the journal and reached for my laptop. If I was going to rebuild, I needed to start with a clear understanding of exactly where I stood. I opened my business accounting software and began reviewing the numbers with fresh eyes, no longer filtering them through the lens of Nathan's expectations or Diane's dismissal. The truth revealed itself in black and white. Rachel Bennett Photography was profitable. Not wildly so, but steadily growing year over year. With some adjustments, perhaps subletting part of the studio space or focusing more on the higher margin corporate work, I could absolutely support myself while fighting for my share of the marital assets. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Clients loved the Morgan anniversary portraits, asking about booking you for their daughter's senior photos next month." Something settled in my chest, a certainty I hadn't felt since that phone notification had jolted me awake 3 nights ago. I had lost my husband, my home, and temporarily, my financial security. But I hadn't lost my talent, my business, or my ability to rebuild. I texted Zoe back. "Great. Tell them I'd love to do the senior session. Coming into the studio this afternoon. We need to talk about some new business strategies." Setting my phone down, I moved to the tiny bathroom and stared at my reflection. In the mirror. The woman looking back at me had shadows under her eyes and tension in her jaw, but there was something else there too. A determination that hadn't been present before. "You never deserved him anyway," Diane had said, the words meant to wound, to diminish, to remind me of my place in their social hierarchy. But what if she was right? Just not in the way she'd intended. What if I deserved better than a man who would abandon me in the night, taking our shared resources with him? What if I deserved better than a relationship where my worth was constantly measured against standards I had no interest in meeting? What if, all this time, Nathan had been the one who didn't deserve me? I straightened my shoulders and began getting ready for the day. There was work to be done, A business to adjust, a lawyer to consult, a life to reclaim. And for the first time since Nathan had left, I felt genuinely certain that I was equal to the task. As I dressed in one of the few professional outfits I'd brought with me, a simple black dress that I often wore when meeting new clients, I made a decision. I would stop thinking of myself as Nathan's abandoned wife and start remembering who I was. Rachel Bennett, photographer, business owner, survivor. The woman Nathan and Diane had tried to make me believe wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't capable of standing on her own. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone stronger, someone who was just beginning to realize her own power. The studio felt different as I unlocked the door that afternoon. Nothing had physically changed. The exposed brick walls still displayed my favorite prints. The vintage furniture I'd carefully selected still created cozy consultation nooks. The equipment was all in its proper place, but I was different, seeing it through new eyes, understanding its value in a way I hadn't fully allowed myself to before. Zoe looked up from her computer as I walked in, relief washing over her face. "Rachel, thank God. Are you okay? Your texts have been so cryptic." I set my bag down and took a deep breath. Nathan left me. He and his mother emptied our joint account in the middle of the night, and he's filing for divorce. Zoe's jaw dropped. "What? Are you serious? That's criminal." "That's what my lawyer says," I replied, the word lawyer still feeling strange on my tongue. "But recovering the money will take time." "Oh my God, Rachel, I'm so sorry." She stood up and came around the desk. "What can I do? How can I help?" Her immediate offer of support touched me deeply. Zoe had been with me for nearly 2 years, starting as an intern and quickly becoming indispensable. I'd promoted her to full-time assistant 6 months ago, a decision Nathan had questioned, suggesting we wait until the business really needed the extra help. "Actually," I said, "I need to talk to you about the business, about some changes we might need to make." Fear flashed across her face. Are you closing the studio?" "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not. But I need to be smarter about how we operate, at least until I sort out this financial mess. Let's sit down and look at everything together." For the next 2 hours, Zoe and I pored over the books, analyzing every aspect of the business. She knew the day-to-day operations even better than I did in some ways, and her insights were invaluable. "The wedding packages are our biggest moneymakers," she pointed out, "but they also require the most time and resources." I nodded. "And the corporate clients are steadier, more predictable income. Plus," Zoe added, "they often lead to repeat business. Like Meridian Tech, they started with just executive headshots, but now we do all their product photography, events, and marketing materials." As we talked, a plan began to take shape. We could focus more on corporate clients in the short term. They paid promptly and required less editing time. We could temporarily reduce our wedding bookings to only the higher-end packages where the profit margins were best. And we could sublease part of the studio space to another creative professional a few days a week. Perhaps that makeup artist who had inquired about it last month. "This could actually work," I said, slightly surprised by how straightforward. The solutions seemed once I was looking at the business clearly, without the filter of Nathan's and Diane's expectations. "Of course it can work," Zoe said with such confidence that I looked at her in surprise. "Rachel, you've built an amazing business here. Everyone in the local photography community knows it. Why do you think I was willing to take an internship? That paid practically nothing? I wanted to learn from you." Her words warmed something in me that had been cold since that terrible morning. "Thank you, Zoe. I needed to hear that today." "It's just the truth," she shrugged. "And for what it's worth, I never liked the way Nathan talked about the studio, like it was your cute little hobby or something." I stared at her. "You noticed that?" Yeah, we all did. Me, Brady, even some of the clients. Brady was our part-time assistant who helped with the larger shoots. Remember when he came by during the Westfield campaign shoot? He kept making those comments about how you were playing with the big boys now, like you hadn't already been shooting for major clients for years. I did remember. I'd been so proud of landing the Westfield campaign, a major local real estate developer who wanted lifestyle shots for their new luxury apartment complex. It was our biggest corporate contract to date. Nathan had stopped by the shoot, ostensibly to bring me lunch, but had spent the time making small talk with the Westfield executives about golf and subtly pointing out that his investment firm handled portfolios much larger than Westfield's developments. I'd been embarrassed at the time, worried he was undermining my professional relationship with the client. But afterward, he'd insisted he was just trying to help, to show the clients that we moved in the same circles they did. I guess I've been making excuses for him for a long time, I said quietly. Zoe reached out and squeezed my hand. You loved him. That's what people do when they love someone. Yeah, well, it seems like he didn't love me quite enough to stick around or, not steal my money. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. His loss, Zoe said firmly. And for what it's worth, I always thought his mother was a nightmare. The way she looked at me when I helped at your anniversary party last year, like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. I remembered that party too. Diane had insisted on hosting it at her house, claiming our apartment was too small for a proper celebration. She'd hired caterers, florists, and even a string quartet, all of her choosing, none of which reflected Nathan's or my taste. When I'd brought Zoe to help me set up a small photo area for guests, Diane had repeatedly referred to her as the help, despite my corrections. She was always difficult, I acknowledged. But I never thought she hated me enough to convince Nathan to clean out our account and leave in the middle of the night. Well, Zoe said pragmatically, now you know. And I, for one, think you're going to be much better off without both of them looking over your shoulder and making you feel small. As Zoe and I continued working through our business strategy, my phone buzzed with a text from Vivian, my lawyer. Judge Harmon granted our emergency motion. Hearing scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Nathan and his attorney must appear and explain the withdrawal. Good news. A wave of relief washed over me. At least the legal system seemed to recognize the injustice of what had happened. Good. News? Zoe asked, noticing my expression. The judge granted an emergency hearing about the money, I explained. It's a start. That's great. Zoe's enthusiasm was infectious. See, things are already turning around. After Zoe left for the day, I remained at the studio, drawn to my camera equipment in a way I hadn't been since Nathan's departure. Photography had always been my refuge, my way of processing the world. Perhaps it could help me now. I set up a simple backdrop and positioned my camera on the tripod. Self-portraits weren't something I often did. I was more comfortable on the other side of the lens. But suddenly it felt important to capture this moment, this version of myself in transition. The act of setting up the shot was meditative, adjusting the lights, checking the angles, setting the timer. Technical details that required focus and precision, leaving little room for the swirl of emotions that had been my constant companion for days. I stood before the backdrop, unsure of how to pose, how to look. Should I smile? That felt false. Should I look serious? That felt like giving too much power to the pain. In the end, I simply looked straight into the lens and let myself be seen, vulnerable, but unbroken. The camera clicked, capturing the moment. I took several more shots, changing position slightly each time. When I uploaded them to my computer, I was startled by what I saw. The woman in the photographs wasn't the polished, careful person I'd been for the past 7 years. The woman who dressed to please Nathan's colleagues and smiled graciously at Diane's backhanded compliments. But neither was she the broken, shell-shocked woman I'd seen in the mirror the morning after Nathan left. This woman had clear eyes that held both pain and determination. Her posture spoke of resilience, not defeat. There was a rawness to her that felt more authentic than anything I'd seen in myself for years. I selected one image and began editing it. Not to smooth away imperfections as I might do for a client, but to enhance the contrasts, the play of light and shadow that gave the portrait its emotional depth. When I finished, I sent it to the studio printer and waited as the large format machine hummed to life. The resulting print was striking, a 20x30 portrait of a woman at a crossroads, vulnerable yet powerful. I hung it on the empty wall near my desk, a reminder of who I was becoming. My phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Rachel Bennett speaking. Ms. Bennett, this is Kevin Walsh from First National Bank. I'm calling about the inquiry you made regarding the withdrawal from your joint account with Nathan Winters. My heart raced. Yes, thank you for calling back. I've reviewed the transaction records as you requested. The withdrawal was made in person at our downtown branch at 11:42 p.m. on Monday night. We have extended hours at that location until midnight. For our premium clients. In person? I repeated, confused. Both Nathan and I would have had to be present for such a large withdrawal, wouldn't we? There was an uncomfortable pause. According to our records, both account holders were present. The withdrawal was authorized with both signatures and verified with photo ID. That's impossible, I said, my voice rising. I was asleep at home. I never signed anything. I never authorized any withdrawal. Another pause. Ms. Bennett, are you saying that your signature was forged? That's exactly what I'm saying, I replied, anger replacing confusion. Can you send me a copy of this supposed authorization I signed? I'll need to consult with our legal department, he hedged. But given the circumstances and the size of the withdrawal, I think we can provide that documentation to your attorney. After taking down Vivian's contact information, Kevin assured me the bank would investigate the matter thoroughly. As I hung up, my mind was racing. Nathan hadn't just taken the money, he had forged my signature to do it. That wasn't just morally wrong, it was illegal. I immediately called Vivian to update her on this new information. This changes things, she said, her voice sharp with interest. If we can prove forgery, and it sounds like we can with the bank's documentation, this becomes a much more serious case. It's not just about splitting marital assets anymore, it's about fraud. What does that mean practically? I asked. It means Nathan is in a much more vulnerable position legally. It gives us significant leverage in negotiations, and frankly, it means his mother might be implicated as well if she was involved in planning this. A strange sense of calm settled over me as Vivian explained the next steps. The legal system, with its clear rules and consequences, provided a framework for justice that felt reassuringly solid amid the emotional chaos of the past few days. One more thing, Vivian added before we hung up. Have you checked your credit report yet? If Nathan was willing to forge your signature for this withdrawal, there might be other financial issues you're not aware of. The suggestion sent a chill through me. I'll do that right away. After ending the call, I immediately pulled up my credit report online. Most of it looked familiar. Our joint mortgage on the apartment, my student loans from photography, school, nearly paid off, and my business credit card. But then I noticed something strange. A line of credit opened 6 months ago at Meridian Bank for $50,000 with my name as a co-signer. I had never opened such an account. I had never even set foot in Meridian Bank. With shaking hands, I called Vivian back and explained what I'd found. Document everything, she instructed. We'll add this to our case. And Rachel, don't confront Nathan directly about any of this. Let's let him walk into the hearing unprepared. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet studio, absorbing the implications of what I'd discovered. Nathan hadn't just left me. He had been planning this for months, systematically setting up financial traps that I was only now beginning to uncover. The pain of this calculated betrayal was different from the raw hurt of his abandonment. It was colder, sharper, and strangely clarifying. This hadn't been a sudden decision, an impulsive act driven by emotion. This had been a deliberate campaign to undermine my financial security while presenting a facade of partnership. I stared at my self-portrait on the wall, at the woman with the clear, determined eyes. "You never deserved him anyway," Diane had sneered. And in that moment, looking at the evidence of Nathan's methodical betrayal, I finally, truly believed she was right. Just not in the way she had intended. I hadn't deserved a husband who would forge my signature and steal my money. I hadn't deserved a husband who would open fraudulent credit lines in my name. I hadn't deserved a husband who had been planning to abandon me for months while smiling to my face and sharing my bed. The realization was both painful and liberating. The foundation of my marriage had been built on quicksand, but that didn't mean I had to sink with it. I had other strengths, other foundations to build upon. As if to underscore this thought, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Meridian Tech, the corporate client Zoe and I had discussed earlier. Rachel, the executive team, was extremely impressed with the last campaign photos. We'd like to discuss expanding our contract to include quarterly shoots for all our marketing materials. Are you available to meet next week? A smile spread across my face as I typed my response, confirming a meeting and professionally noting my excitement about the potential expanded partnership. This was something Nathan and Diane could never take from me. My talent, my professional reputation, my ability to build and grow my business. I looked around the studio, at the space I had created, the business I had built, the life I had established, independent of Nathan and his family. For the first time since that terrible morning, I felt something like hope. Not just that I would survive this betrayal, but that I might emerge from it stronger, clearer, and more fully myself than I had been in years. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles and financial challenges. But standing in my studio, surrounded by evidence of what I had already built once and could build again, I felt equal to the challenge. Nathan and Diane had tried to destroy me, but they had underestimated one crucial fact. I was not defined by my relationship to them. I never had been. And now, freed from the weight of their expectations and judgments, I could finally become the person I was always meant to be. The courthouse loomed before me, an imposing structure of granite and glass that seemed designed to intimidate. I straightened my charcoal gray blazer, one of the few professional pieces I'd managed to grab during my hasty move, and checked my reflection in my compact mirror one last time. I looked polished, professional, and far more confident than I felt. "Ready?" Vivian asked, closing her sleek leather portfolio. She looked every inch the high-powered attorney in her tailored navy suit and crisp white blouse. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Remember what we discussed," she said as we climbed the courthouse steps. "Let me do most of the talking. Answer any questions from the judge directly and honestly, but don't volunteer information unless asked. And whatever happens, don't react emotionally to anything Nathan or his attorney says." That last part would be the most difficult. I hadn't seen Nathan since that terrible confrontation at Diane's house, and I had no idea how I would feel facing him across a courtroom. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with polished wooden benches and the smell of lemon polish, and old books. A few other people were scattered around, another attorney reviewing documents, a court reporter setting up her equipment, a bailiff standing near the judge's bench. We had just settled at our table when the door opened, and Nathan walked in with a man I assumed was his attorney. My breath caught in my throat. He looked exactly the same. Perfectly tailored suit, hair neatly styled, his posture radiating the easy confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. How could he look so unchanged when everything else had been turned? Upside down? His eyes met mine briefly before sliding away, his expression carefully neutral. The lack of anything, remorse, anger, even triumph in his gaze hit me harder than any emotion would have. It was as if I were a stranger or a business transaction to be handled efficiently and without fuss. Then a movement behind him caught my eye, and I stiffened. Diane. She wasn't supposed to be here. This was a legal proceeding between Nathan and me, not a family affair. Yet there she was, immaculately dressed in an expensive beige suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, taking a seat directly behind Nathan. Vivian followed my gaze and frowned. "Interesting," she murmured. "Let's see how the judge feels about her presence." We didn't have to wait long to find out. Judge Harmon, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with short gray hair and piercing blue eyes, entered the courtroom and quickly took control of the proceedings. After the initial formalities, she glanced at Diane and then at Nathan's attorney. "Counselor, who is the woman sitting behind your client?" "My client's mother, Your Honor," Nathan's attorney replied smoothly. "She's here for moral support." Judge Harmon's expression remained neutral. "Unless she is a witness or has other relevant legal standing in this matter, she needs to wait outside." Diane's face registered shock, clearly unaccustomed to being dismissed. Nathan turned and whispered something to her, but she remained seated, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mrs. Winters," the judge addressed her directly. "I need this." Courtroom cleared of anyone not directly involved in this emergency hearing. "You may wait in the hallway." For a moment, I thought Diane might refuse, but Nathan touched her arm and whispered again. With obvious reluctance, she gathered her designer handbag and walked out, shooting me a glacial glare as she passed. That small victory gave me a surge of confidence. Here, in this courtroom, Diane's social standing and connections meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was the law. Judge Harmon wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "We're here regarding the emergency motion filed by Rachel Bennett concerning funds removed from a joint account held with Nathan Winters. Ms. Torres, please present your client's position." Vivian stood, her posture commanding attention. "Your Honor, on the night of September 27th, Mr. Winters transferred $127,251.45 from a joint savings account he shared with my client, leaving just over $200 remaining. This transfer was made without Ms. Bennett's knowledge or consent. Furthermore, we have evidence suggesting Mr. Winters forged Ms. Bennett's signature to authorize this transaction, which would constitute fraud." Nathan shifted in his seat, and I saw his attorney place a warning hand on his arm. Vivian continued, laying out our case methodically, the timing of the withdrawal coinciding with Nathan's abrupt departure, his note acknowledging he had taken the money, and most damning, the bank's confirmation that the withdrawal required both signatures when I had clearly been home asleep. When Vivian mentioned the fraudulent line of credit I had discovered, Nathan visibly tensed, his confident facade cracking slightly. His attorney leaned over to whisper something, and Nathan's expression darkened. Judge Harmon turned to Nathan's attorney. "Mr. Peterson, what is your client's response to these serious allegations?" Douglas Peterson stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges transferring funds from the joint account. However, he did so with the full intention of protecting those marital assets during a time of marital dissolution. Mr. Winters maintains that his wife had been making concerning financial decisions regarding her business, and he feared the funds would be depleted irresponsibly." The audacity of this claim stole my breath. I felt my cheeks flush with anger, but remembering Vivian's advice, I kept my expression neutral. "As for the signature," Peterson continued, "my client believed he had implied consent to act on both their behalves regarding financial matters, as had been their practice throughout the marriage." "Implied consent to forge a signature on a major withdrawal?" Judge Harmon asked, her skepticism evident. Peterson cleared his throat. My client may have exercised poor judgment in the manner of the withdrawal, but his intentions were to preserve marital assets, not to deprive Ms. Bennett. And the line of credit opened in Ms. Bennett's name without her knowledge, Judge Harmon pressed. My client needed additional capital for an investment opportunity, Peterson replied smoothly. Given their history of joint financial decision-making, he believed Ms. Bennett would approve. He intended to inform her once the investment had proved successful. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing bitterly. Nathan had never mentioned any investment opportunity, and our history of joint financial decision-making had consisted primarily of him making decisions and informing me afterward. Judge Harmon was clearly unimpressed. Mr. Winters, stand. Up, please. Nathan rose, his expression carefully composed. Mr. Winters, are you aware that forging a signature on a financial document is a criminal offense? Your Honor, I didn't believe I was forging anything, Nathan replied, his voice steady. Rachel and I had an understanding. Did you physically sign Ms. Bennett's name to the withdrawal authorization? Judge Harmon interrupted. A tense silence filled the courtroom. Nathan glanced at his attorney, who gave a slight nod. Yes, Your Honor, Nathan finally admitted. But I was entitled to that money. Half of it is mine. Half, Judge Harmon emphasized the word. Not all. And you're entitled to your half through proper legal channels during divorce proceedings, not through unilateral action and certainly not through forgery. She shuffled through some papers on her bench, then looked back up at Nathan. Regarding the line of credit opened in Ms. Bennett's name, did you sign her name to that application as well? Nathan hesitated longer this time. I thought it would be a good surprise. The investment was going to benefit both of us. Answer the question, Mr. Winters, Judge Harmon said firmly. Yes, I signed her name, he admitted reluctantly. I stared at him. This man I had loved and trusted, now openly admitting to multiple acts of fraud as if they were minor misunderstandings. Who was he? Had I ever really known him at all? Judge Harmon wasn't finished. Mr. Winters, where are the funds now? They're in a separate account, Your Honor. Safe. Under your sole name? Yes, Your Honor. And what about the funds from the fraudulent line of credit? Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Those were invested. In what, exactly? Nathan glanced at his attorney again. A business opportunity through a family connection. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Winters, I want the full amount withdrawn from the joint account transferred to the court's escrow account by the end of business today. Not half, the full amount. We will then determine appropriate distribution pending your divorce proceedings. Nathan's confident demeanor finally cracked. But, Your Honor, some of those funds have already been allocated to— I don't care if you've allocated them to a trip to the moon, Mr. Winters. Those funds were improperly and potentially illegally obtained. You will return them immediately. She turned to his attorney. Mr. Peterson, I suggest you advise your client on the seriousness of his actions. Forgery and financial fraud are criminal matters. Ms. Bennett would be well within her rights to pursue criminal charges. Peterson nodded grimly. We understand. Your Honor. Judge Harmon turned to me, her expression softening slightly. Ms. Bennett, the court acknowledges the financial hardship this situation has created for you. Once the funds are in escrow, we can discuss releasing a portion to you for immediate living expenses while the divorce proceedings continue. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Winters from making any further financial transactions in Ms. Bennett's name or accessing any of her accounts. Mr. Peterson, ensure your client understands that violating this order would have serious consequences. Nathan stood rigid, his jaw clenched tightly. This was not how he had expected this hearing to go. He had walked in with the same easy confidence he'd always had, certain that his actions would be, if not applauded, at least understood and excused. Now he was being treated like what he actually was, someone who had committed fraud. Court is adjourned. I expect confirmation of the fund transfer by 5 p.m. today, Judge Harmon said, rising from her bench. As everyone gathered their things, Nathan approached our table, ignoring Vivian's warning look. "Rachel," he said quietly, "we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand." I looked up at him, this man who had shared my bed for 7 years, who had promised to love and honor me, who had betrayed me in the most calculated way possible. "No, Nathan, we don't need to talk. Our lawyers can handle everything from here." "Don't be like that," he said, lowering his voice further. "This isn't who we are. We can work this out privately, come to an arrangement that works for both of us." The sad thing was, a week ago I might have agreed. I might have been so desperate to salvage something, to believe there was still goodness in him, that I would have settled for less than I deserved just to avoid conflict. But that was before I'd seen the forged signatures, before I'd discovered the fraudulent credit line, before I'd watched him stand in court and admit to these things while still somehow believing he was justified. "This is exactly who you are, Nathan," I replied calmly. "I just didn't see it until now." I stood, gathering my purse and nodding to Vivian that I was ready to leave. As we walked past Nathan, I noticed his expression, a mixture of confusion and indignation, as if he truly couldn't understand why I wouldn't give him another chance to manipulate me. In the hallway, Diane was waiting, her face tight with anger. "This is ridiculous," she hissed as we approached. "You know Nathan was only doing what was best for both of you. You've turned this into a circus." "No, Diane," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "Nathan committed fraud, twice. That's not what's best for anyone." "He wouldn't have had to if you weren't so financially irresponsible," she snapped. "Running that little studio of yours into the ground, draining his resources." Vivian stepped slightly in front of me. "Mrs. Winters, I advise you not to make false accusations about my client, especially not in a courthouse." "False?" Diane scoffed. "Everyone knows her business is a vanity project. Without Nathan's support, she'd have failed years ago." Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in liberation. I no longer cared what Diane thought of me or my business. Her opinion, which had seemed so important for so long, suddenly meant nothing. My studio generated $187,000 in revenue. "Last year, Diane?" I said quietly. "Nathan didn't support it. I did, with hard work and talent. And now, I'm going to continue building it without him or your toxic influence." Her eyes widened in shock, clearly not expecting this confident response. "Now, if you'll excuse us," I continued, "we have a business to run and funds to reclaim. Enjoy your day." As Vivian and I walked away, leaving Diane speechless for perhaps the first time in her life, I felt lightness in my step that had been missing for days. The hearing had been a victory, yes, but the real triumph was internal. I had faced Nathan and Diane without crumbling, without doubting myself, without accepting their distorted version of reality. Outside the courthouse, Vivian turned to me, with a smile. "That went better than expected. Judge Harmon clearly saw through their attempts to justify the unjustifiable." "What happens now?" I asked as we descended the courthouse steps. "Now we wait for them to transfer the funds, which they will." "Nathan doesn't want criminal charges," Vivian explained. "Once the money is in escrow, we'll petition for release of your portion for immediate needs. Meanwhile, we continue building our case for the divorce proceedings." The bright autumn sun felt warm on my face as we reached the sidewalk. "Do you think he'll try something else? Find another way to hide assets or cause problems?" Vivian considered this. "He might, but he'd be foolish to do so. Judge Harmon isn't someone who tolerates games, and she's clearly watching him closely now. Besides, Your husband doesn't strike me as someone who's accustomed to being caught. He thought he was being clever with the withdrawal and the credit line, but now he knows we're scrutinizing everything. She was right. Nathan had always operated from a position of privilege, expecting his actions to go unquestioned. The hearing today had been a rude awakening for him, perhaps his first experience with genuine accountability. "Thank you, Vivian," I said sincerely. "For everything." She smiled, squeezing my shoulder gently. "This is just the beginning, Rachel. You're standing up for yourself, and that's the hardest part. It gets easier from here." As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. "How did it go? The whole team is on pins and needles here." I smiled, touched by her concern and support. "Victory," I texted back. "The judge ordered him to return all the money today. We'll tell you everything when I get there." 3 more messages arrived in quick succession, one from Zoe with celebratory emojis, one from Brady offering to buy champagne, and one from our new intern asking if this meant the studio was definitely staying open. Their messages reminded me that I wasn't alone in this fight. I had a team of people who believed in me and in what we were building together. I had friends like Ellie who had stepped up when I needed support most. I had a lawyer who was fiercely advocating for my rights. And most importantly, I had myself, stronger and clearer than I'd been in years. As I drove to the studio, I found myself thinking not about what I had lost, but about what I was reclaiming: my financial independence, my professional confidence, and my sense of self-worth. Nathan and Diane had tried to break me, but instead, they had inadvertently helped me find my strength. The road ahead would still be challenging: divorce proceedings, rebuilding my finances, establishing a new life on my own terms. But for the first time since that terrible morning when my phone had chimed with that account alert, I felt truly certain that I would not just survive this betrayal, but ultimately thrive beyond it. "You never deserved him anyway," Diane had said, intending those words as the ultimate dismissal. She couldn't have known how right she was, or how those words would become my unexpected mantra of liberation. I deserved better, and I was finally ready to claim it. The following week passed in a blur of activity. True to Judge Harmon's order, Nathan had transferred the full amount to the court's escrow account by the end of that day. Vivian had immediately filed for release of half the funds for my living expenses, and within 3 days, I had access to money again. My money that I had earned and saved over years of hard work. The first thing I did was pay the rent on my temporary apartment for the next 2 months. The second was to clear the small emergency loan Ellie had insisted on giving me. The third was to take my entire studio team out for dinner to thank them for their unwavering support during the crisis. "To Rachel," Zoe said, raising her glass, "the most resilient boss in the photography business." "And to all of you," I countered, raising my own glass, "for believing in me and in what we're building together." As we ate and drank and laughed, I found myself marveling at how different I felt from the shell-shocked woman who had discovered Nathan's betrayal less than 2 weeks ago. The pain was still there, of course. 7 years of marriage couldn't be erased in days, but it was no longer consuming me. I was sleeping again, eating properly, thinking clearly about the future. The next morning, my phone rang as I was setting up for a corporate shoot at Meridian Tech. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I adjusted my lighting setup. Rachel Bennett speaking. "Rachel, it's Nathan." My hands stilled on the light stand. "I'm working, Nathan. You should contact my lawyer." "Please," he said, and something in his voice, a note of desperation I'd never heard before, made me pause. "I need to talk to you. Not about the money or the divorce, just talk. Please." I should have refused. Vivian had advised me to keep all communication with Nathan strictly through legal channels. But despite everything, Despite the betrayal and the fraud and the lies, some small part of me still wanted answers only he could provide. "I'm on a shoot until 4, I said finally. "After that, I can meet you at Thornton's for half an hour. That's all." Thornton's was a cafe in the business district, public, neutral ground, with enough ambient noise for privacy but plenty of witnesses if things went sideways. It was far from the upscale restaurants Nathan usually preferred, which was precisely why I'd chosen it. "Thank you," he said, sounding genuinely relieved. "I'll be there at 4:30. I ended the call and stared at my phone for a long moment, wondering if I'd just made a mistake. Then I texted Ellie, "Meeting Nathan at Thornton's at 4:30 for If you don't hear from me by 5:15, send search party." Her response came seconds later. "Are you sure that's wise? Want me to come as backup?" "I'll be fine," I replied. "Just letting someone know where I am. Public place, short meeting." "Okay, be careful. Don't let him manipulate you. Remember who you are now." Her last sentence stuck with me throughout the day's shoot. Remember who you are now, not Nathan's wife, not the woman desperately seeking approval from his family and social circle. Just Rachel Bennett, photographer, business owner, survivor. The shoot went exceptionally well, with the Meridian Tech executives clearly pleased with the direction of the new campaign. By the time I packed up my equipment and headed to Thornton's, I was riding the professional high that always came from a successful session. Nathan was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood as I approached, an instinctively gentlemanly gesture that seemed oddly out of place given the circumstances. "I got you a latte," he said, gesturing to one of the cups. "Still your favorite, right?" I left it untouched as I sat down. "What did you want to talk about, Nathan?" He looked different, tired, with shadows under his eyes, and his normally impeccable appearance slightly rumpled. The confident, polished investment manager had been replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice low. "What I did, taking the money, leaving like that, it was wrong. I know that now." I raised an eyebrow. "You know that now? What exactly helped you reach that conclusion? The judge pointing out that you committed fraud, or the fact that your plan didn't work?" He winced. "I deserve that. But Rachel, you have to understand. I wasn't thinking clearly. My mother—" "Stop," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "If the next words out of your mouth are going to blame your mother for your actions, this conversation is over. You're a 35-year-old man, Nathan, not a child. You made your choices." He deflated slightly, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. I'm not blaming her. I made the decision. I signed your name. I took the money. That's on me." The direct admission startled me. I'd expected justifications, excuses, attempts to minimize what he'd done. His straightforward acknowledgement of responsibility seemed almost out of character. "Why?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me for days. "Why not just tell me you wanted a divorce? Why the middle-of-the-night disappearance and theft?" Nathan stared into his coffee cup, as if the answers might be swirling in the dark liquid. "I was a coward," he said finally. "I knew a normal divorce would mean difficult conversations, emotional scenes, having to face your hurt and disappointment. I wanted to avoid all that, make a clean break." "A clean break," I repeated incredulously. "By committing fraud?" "I didn't think of it as fraud at the time," he admitted. "I thought of it as taking what was mine, what we had built together but that I felt entitled to control." The honesty was almost more painful than the lies had been. This wasn't some misunderstanding or temporary lapse in judgment. This was a fundamental worldview in which Nathan truly believed he had the right to make unilateral decisions about our shared resources. "And the line of credit in my name?" I pressed. "How did you justify that to yourself?" He had the grace to look genuinely ashamed, That was. There's no excuse for that. I needed money for an investment opportunity, and I'd already maxed out my personal credit. I told myself I'd pay it off before you ever knew about it. What kind of investment opportunity requires fraudulent credit applications? I asked, suspicion growing. Nathan hesitated, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. It's complicated. Try me. I'm smarter than you and your mother ever gave me credit for. He flinched at that, but nodded. It was a real estate development deal. A friend of my mother's was putting together a group of investors for a luxury condo project in Westlake. I frowned. Westlake? Isn't that where they've been fighting that wetland protection order? Yes, Nathan admitted. The project has been controversial, but the potential returns were enormous, especially for early investors. So you forged my signature to invest in a potentially illegal development project that would destroy protected wetlands? The pieces were coming together in a way that made me feel physically ill. Please tell me that's not where all the money from our joint account went to. His silence was answer enough. Oh my God, Nathan. I sat back, genuinely shocked. You didn't just betray me. You put our life savings into a project that could be shut down by environmental regulations at any moment. It's not like that, he insisted. The developers have connections, people who can make sure the regulations aren't a problem. It's a solid investment. Connections? You mean bribes? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Nathan, that's not just unethical, it's potentially criminal. Is that really who you are? He looked genuinely confused by my reaction. It's business, Rachel. This is how things get done in the real world. Everyone cuts corners sometimes. Forging signatures and destroying protected ecosystems isn't cutting corners, Nathan. It's breaking the law and moral bankruptcy. We sat in silence for a moment, the gulf between our worldviews never more apparent than in this moment. I had spent 7 years with this man, loved him, built a life with him, and yet somehow had never truly seen this core aspect of his character. Does your fancy lawyer know about this investment? I asked finally, because mine will as soon as I leave here. Panic flashed across Nathan's face. Rachel, please, if this gets out, if the investment group comes under scrutiny, it could ruin me professionally. I could lose my license. You should have thought of that before you forged my signature, I replied coldly. Before you put our money into something that could destroy both of us financially and potentially lead to criminal charges. I'll get the money back, he said quickly. I'll pull out of the investment. Return your half. Just, please don't make this public. I studied him carefully, seeing the desperation in his eyes. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about his career, his reputation, possibly even legal consequences beyond the fraud he'd already admitted to. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady and controlled. You're going to withdraw from this investment immediately and return the full amount to the escrow account. You're going to pay off and close that fraudulent line of credit in my name. And you're going to agree to a fair and equitable division of all our assets in the divorce, with no further games or hidden accounts. He nodded rapidly. Yes, all of that, I will. I'm not finished, I continued. In exchange, I won't report what you've told me about this shady investment scheme to the authorities. But if I discover any other financial deceptions, any other accounts or investments involving my name or our money, all bets are off. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, Rachel. I promise. No more surprises. I'll make this right. You can't make this right, Nathan, I said quietly. You can mitigate the damage, but you can't undo what you've done, not the fraud, and not the destruction of our marriage. He reached across the table, as if to take my hand, but I pulled back. I did love you, he said, his voice thick with emotion that seemed genuine. Please believe that at least. I considered his words, searching for the truth in them. Maybe you did, in your way. But you didn't respect me. And without respect, love is just an empty word. I stood, gathering my bag. I need to go. My lawyer will contact yours about the investment withdrawal and credit line closure. I expect it to be handled promptly. Rachel, he called as I turned to leave. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for the money, but for not being the man you thought I was. I paused, looking back at him. That's the thing. Nathan, I'm not sure I ever really knew who you were, and that's on both of us. Walking out of Thornton's, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. Not the kind that comes with forgiveness or reconciliation, but the clarity of finally seeing a situation and a person without illusions or wishful thinking. The Nathan I had loved had been partly real and partly a construction of my own making. I had filled in the gaps in his character with what I wanted to see, ignored the warning signs, excused the red flags. No more. As I drove to Ellie's apartment where I was having dinner that night, I called Vivian and gave her a complete rundown of Nathan's revelation about the questionable investment. This changes things, she said, her voice sharp with interest. This could give us significant leverage in the divorce negotiations. If he's involved in something potentially illegal, he'll be highly motivated to settle quickly and generously, to keep it quiet. That's what I was thinking, I agreed. But I want everything completely above board on our side. I don't want to be accused of blackmail or extortion. Of course, Vivian assured me. We'll position this as a good faith agreement to keep private matters private, provided he rectifies all financial improprieties immediately. It's a completely reasonable stance. By the time I arrived at Ellie's, I had a text from Vivian confirming. She had already spoken to Nathan's attorney. Peterson sounded panicked, she wrote. Says client will comply with all demands, expecting withdrawal confirmation tomorrow. Ellie opened her door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. That bad, huh? Actually, no, I said, surprising myself with a laugh. That clarifying. Over dinner, I told her everything about Nathan's admission, the shady investment, his desperate plea to keep it quiet. Unbelievable, Ellie said, shaking her head as she refilled our wine glasses. So he's not just a mama's boy with entitlement? Issues. He's actually corrupt. I think in his mind it's just how business works, I said. The scary part is, he genuinely didn't seem to understand why I found it so disturbing. Like ethical lines are just suggestions that don't apply to people like him. Ellie snorted. People like him being rich white guys whose mommies told them they were special their whole lives? I couldn't help laughing. Something like that. We moved to her couch with our wine, and Ellie fixed me with a serious look. Can I ask you something personal? You don't have to answer. After everything we've been through, ask away. Were you happy with Nathan before all this happened? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the betrayal, the legal issues, the financial implications, that I hadn't really stopped to consider the state of our marriage before its dramatic end. I thought I was, I said slowly. But looking back, I don't know. There was always this sense that I was trying to measure up, to fit into his world, to please his mother, to be the kind of wife he could show off to his colleagues. Ellie nodded. I remember when you first started dating him. You used to wear these amazing vintage dresses and those bright red cowboy boots everywhere. Then suddenly it was all neutral pantsuits and pearls. I hadn't thought about those red boots in years. They were probably still in a box somewhere in the apartment I'd shared with Nathan. You stopped laughing as much too, Ellie continued. You were always so careful about what you said, how you presented yourself. It was like watching you turn down your own volume to make space for him. Her words hit home with unexpected force. I had changed for Nathan, gradually and almost imperceptibly, until I barely recognized the woman I'd become. The revelation was both painful and liberating. "You're right," I admitted. "I think I confused love with, I don't know, self-improvement? Like, if I could just become the person he and Diane wanted me to be, then I'd finally be good enough, worthy enough." "Worthy of what, though?" Ellie asked gently. "What did they offer that was worth giving up yourself for?" I considered the question seriously. Security, I guess. Status. A sense of belonging to something established and respected. Nathan's family has been in Greenhill for generations. They know everyone. They're invited everywhere. When you're with them, doors open. "And now that those doors have closed?" Ellie prompted. "It feels like—" I searched for the right words. "Like breathing fresh air after being in a stuffy room for too long. Painful at first, but then clarifying, necessary." Ellie smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "That's how I know you're going to be more than okay. You're already seeing this as an opportunity, not just a loss." "I don't know if I'd go that far," I laughed. "I still have moments of absolute fury when I think about what he did. And moments of devastating sadness when I remember the good times, the life I thought we were building." "Of course you do," Ellie said. "That's normal. But you're not letting those moments define you or your future. You're fighting back, standing up for yourself, making plans. The old Rachel is coming back, but stronger. The old Rachel. The woman with the vintage dresses and red boots. The woman who had followed her passion for photography before she'd ever met Nathan Winters. The woman who hadn't needed anyone's validation to know her own worth." "You know what?" I said, making a sudden decision. "I'm going back to the apartment tomorrow to get the rest of my things. Will you come with me?" "Absolutely," Ellie replied without hesitation. "What are we looking for in particular?" I smiled, feeling a spark of my old self flaring to life. "My red boots, for starters, and everything else that's mine, that I left behind when I was running away. It's time to reclaim it all." That night, back in my temporary apartment, I found myself unable to sleep. Not from anxiety or grief this time, but from a strange electric energy that coursed through me. It felt like anticipation, like standing on the edge of something new and unknown, but full of possibility. I got up and retrieved the journal Ellie had given me, flipping to a clean page. Instead of rehashing the past or agonizing over Nathan's betrayal, I began to write about the future, what I wanted for my business, for my life, for myself. The list flowed easily. Dreams and goals I had set aside or downplayed during my marriage, now re-emerging with new clarity and urgency. Expand. The studio's corporate client base. Apply for that international photography award I've been too intimidated to pursue. Travel to Iceland to shoot the landscapes I've been obsessed with for years. Find my own place, not a temporary refuge, but a real home that reflects me and my taste, not Nathan's or Diane's. Reconnect with old friends I've neglected. Maybe even date again someday when the time is right, but only someone who values me exactly as I am. As I wrote, a sense of excitement replaced the anger and hurt that had dominated my emotions for the past weeks. Nathan and Diane had tried to convince me that I was less without them, that their acceptance was the measure of my worth. But in trying to break me, they had inadvertently set me free. "You never deserved him anyway," Diane had sneered, intending the ultimate insult. Looking at my list of dreams and possibilities, I finally responded to her assertion with absolute certainty. She was right. I never deserved him. I deserved far, far better. And now, I was going to create it for myself. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" Ellie asked as we pulled up in front of the luxury apartment building I had shared with Nathan. "We could wait until we know he won't be here." I shook my head, checking my appearance in the visor mirror. I'd deliberately chosen an outfit that felt like me, Not Rachel the corporate wife, but Rachel the photographer. Faded jeans, a vintage band t-shirt under a well-worn leather jacket, and simple silver jewelry I'd made myself in a metalworking class years ago. According to his assistant, Nathan's at a conference in Chicago until tomorrow night. Besides, it doesn't matter if he's here. This is still legally my home too, and I have every right to collect my belongings. The doorman, Carlos, brightened when he saw me. "Ms. Bennett, good to see you." "You too, Carlos. How's your daughter doing in her photography class?" I'd helped the teenager with some basic techniques when she'd expressed interest in photography. "She got an A on her midterm project. Those lighting tips you gave her made all the difference." His smile faded slightly. "We've missed seeing you around here." I nodded, touched by his genuine warmth. "I've missed you too. I'm just here to pick up some things today." He hesitated. "Mr. Winters mentioned you might come by. He left something for you at the desk." My stomach tightened as Carlos retrieved an envelope with my name written in Nathan's distinctive handwriting. I tucked it into my jacket pocket without opening it. "Thanks, Carlos." The elevator ride to the 11th floor felt surreal. 3 weeks ago, this had been home. Now it felt like visiting a museum exhibit of someone else's life. I used my key to unlock the door, half expecting it not to work, but it turned smoothly. The apartment was immaculate, of course. Nathan had always been fastidious about cleanliness. But it felt different, emptier somehow, even though most of the furniture remained. "Nice place," Ellie commented, looking around at the high ceilings. The wall of windows overlooking the city, the sleek modern furniture that Nathan had insisted was the height of sophistication. "It's beautiful," I acknowledged. "But it never really felt like mine, you know? Everything was chosen to fit a certain image, a lifestyle that Nathan and Diane valued." We moved through the space methodically, gathering my belongings. Most of my clothes were still there, hanging in the closet Nathan and I had shared. I took only the items that felt truly like me, leaving behind the designer dresses and expensive suits that had been purchased to impress Nathan's colleagues or Diane's friends. In the home office, I collected my photography reference books, awards, and personal files. In the bathroom, my favorite toiletries and the handmade pottery soap dish a client had given me as a thank you gift. It was in the back of our storage closet that I found the box I'd been most hoping to recover, labeled simply Rachel's Things, in my handwriting. Inside were treasures from my pre-Nathan life, my collection of vintage concert t-shirts, the beaded necklaces I'd made during a jewelry-making phase, old journals filled with photography ideas and personal reflections, and, at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, my red cowboy boots. I lifted them out reverently, running my fingers over the worn leather, the intricate stitching, the scuffed toes that told stories of adventures and explorations. "You found them!" Ellie exclaimed, leaning against the closet doorframe. "I can't believe you still have those." "I couldn't bring myself to get rid of them," I admitted, even though Nathan hated them. He said they were too quirky for a professional woman. "Put them on," Ellie urged. I hesitated for just a moment before kicking off my sensible flats and pulling on the boots. They fit perfectly, like they'd been waiting for me all this time. Standing in those boots in the middle of the apartment that had never truly felt like home, I suddenly felt more myself than I had in years. "They look fantastic," Ellie said, grinning. "Very you." I walked to the full-length mirror in the bedroom, examining my reflection. The woman staring back at me, in faded jeans, a vintage t-shirt, and bright red cowboy boots, looked nothing like the polished, careful person I'd become during my marriage. She looked freer, more authentic, more alive. As I studied my reflection, something caught my eye on the dresser behind me, a small wooden jewelry box I didn't recognize. Curious, I turned and picked it up, opening the lid to find a collection of expensive-looking jewelry, a diamond tennis bracelet, sapphire earrings, a pearl necklace I'd seen Diane wearing on several occasions. "That's not yours?" Ellie asked. noticing my confusion. No, and it's definitely not Nathan's. I examined the pieces more carefully. Some of these look like Diane's, but why would they be here? A chill ran down my spine as I remembered Nathan's investment opportunity and his desperation to keep it quiet. Was he hiding assets? Had he taken things from his mother too? "We should go," I said suddenly, closing the box and placing it back exactly where I'd found it. "I've got what I need." As we were loading the last of my boxes into Ellie's car, my phone rang, Vivian's number. "Rachel? Good news," she said when I answered. "Nathan's attorney just confirmed the full withdrawal from that investment you mentioned. The funds should be back in the escrow account by end of day." Relief washed over me. "That's great, Vivian. Thank you." "There's more," she continued. "Given the circumstances, Peterson has indicated Nathan is now willing to agree to a very generous settlement. No protracted court battle, no fighting over assets. He wants this wrapped up quickly and quietly." I thought of the jewelry box upstairs, wondering what other secrets Nathan might be hiding. "How generous are we talking?" "Full 50-50 split of all confirmed marital assets. He keeps his retirement accounts. You keep full ownership of your business with no claim from him, and he's offering an additional $100,000 to compensate for emotional distress. His only condition is a confidentiality clause about the specific circumstances of your separation and his financial activities." The amount took my breath away. "That's significantly more than I expected." "It is," Vivian agreed, "which makes me suspect there's more he's worried about us discovering. But if you're comfortable with it, this is an excellent offer. You could be legally divorced within months instead of years, with your financial future secure." "Let me think." "About it," I said, watching as Ellie closed the trunk of her car, my red boots perched on top of the last box. "I'll call you back this afternoon." After ending the call, I pulled the still unopened envelope from my pocket. Whatever Nathan had to say, it was time to hear it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief note. "Rachel, by now you've spoken with your attorney about the settlement offer. I want you to know it's not just about keeping things quiet. It's about acknowledging that I caused real harm and trying in some small way to make amends. The investment has been fully liquidated, and I'm paying off the fraudulent credit line entirely. I've had a lot of time to think over the past weeks, and I realize now how much I lost by letting my mother's values and expectations dictate our relationship. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I know that bridge is burned. But I wanted you to know that meeting with you that day at Thornton's changed something in me. You helped me see myself clearly for perhaps the first time. I hope the settlement gives you the freedom to rebuild your life on your own terms. You deserve that and more. Nathan P.S. Your camera, the vintage Leica your father gave you, is in the safe behind the painting in the office. The combination is still your birthday. I folded the note carefully and slipped it back into the envelope, emotions swirling. The camera had been a gift from my father on my 16th birthday, the beginning of my photography journey. I'd thought it was lost in our last move. "Everything okay?" Ellie asked, noticing my expression. "There's one more thing I need to get," I said, heading back to the building. In the office, I moved the abstract painting Nathan had commissioned from a rising star in the art world to reveal the wall safe behind it. My fingers trembled slightly as I entered the combination. 0614. The safe door swung open, revealing several documents, a small stack of cash, and there it was, my father's Leica, still in its worn leather case. I reached for it with a sense of reverence, opening the case to find the camera exactly as I remembered it, preserved perfectly. But there was something else in the safe, too. A manila envelope labeled, "Rachel, Important." Inside were documents I'd never seen before, a deed to a small piece of property in my hometown, investment certificates in my name, and an insurance. policy Nathan had taken out on himself with me as the sole beneficiary. These weren't recently added items meant to appease me. The dates on the documents showed they'd been established years ago, early in our marriage. Nathan had created these safety nets for me long before our relationship had begun to fray. It was a small glimpse of the man I'd thought I'd married, someone who, despite his flaws and his mother's influence, had genuinely cared for me in his own way. I gathered the documents and the camera, closing the safe and replacing the painting. As I walked out of the apartment for what would likely be the last time, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The anger and hurt were still there, but they'd been joined by something else. A complex understanding that people, even those who have betrayed us deeply, are rarely all good or all bad. Outside, Ellie was waiting patiently by the car. "Find what you were looking for." I held up the camera case with a smile, and then some. As we drove away from the building, the red boots sitting prominently on the dashboard where I'd placed them, I found myself thinking not about what I'd lost, but about what I'd found. My authentic self, buried under years of compromise and careful self-editing, still vibrant, still creative, still ready to embrace life on her own terms. That evening, in my small temporary apartment, I set up an impromptu studio space, just a white sheet tacked to the wall, a single lamp for lighting, and my father's Leica loaded with film. I put on the red boots, stood before the makeshift backdrop, and set the timer on the camera. Click. The shutter captured a moment in time, a woman in transition, half in shadow and half in light, balanced on the edge between past and future. Not broken by betrayal, but transformed by it, emerging stronger and clearer from the chrysalis of a marriage that had both sheltered and confined her. Later, as I reviewed Nathan's settlement offer with Vivian over the phone, I found myself approaching the decision not from a place of anger or revenge, but from a place of practical wisdom and self-preservation. "I'll accept the offer," I told her, "but I want one addition to the agreement." "What's that?" Vivian asked. "A clause stating that Nathan must continue therapy for at least 1 year," I said. "I'm not trying to control him or punish him, but during our marriage, I watched him struggle between his own values and his mother's expectations. I think he needs help to figure out who he really is without her influence." Vivian was silent for a moment. "That's unusually compassionate, given the circumstances." "It's not about compassion," I clarified. "It's about breaking cycles. If Nathan can learn to stand up to his mother, to develop his own moral compass, maybe he won't do to someone else what he did to me." "I'll propose it to Peterson," Vivian agreed. "But Rachel, may I say something personal?" "Of course." "In 10 years of handling divorces, I've rarely seen someone navigate such a betrayal with the grace and strength you've shown. Most people, in your situation, would be consumed by bitterness, focused solely on extracting maximum pain or financial gain. You're thinking about breaking cycles and healing, even for the person who hurt you. That's remarkable." Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't thought of my actions as particularly graceful or strong. I'd been angry, devastated, confused, all the emotions anyone would feel when betrayed so deeply. But somewhere along the way, those feelings had been joined by a determination not just to survive this betrayal, but to grow through it. "I'm not sure I deserve that much credit." I'm still angry at Nathan. I still have moments where I want to scream or throw things or make him hurt the way I've hurt. But I'm also starting to see how this experience has forced me to reclaim parts of myself I'd set aside during our marriage. I don't want to lose that clarity by staying stuck in anger. After ending the call with Vivian, I sat at my small kitchen table, my father's Leica before me, the red boots kicked off but still within reach, and opened my journal to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote 3 words: what I found. Beneath it, I began to list not the material possessions I'd reclaimed from the apartment, but the deeper discoveries of these tumultuous weeks. My professional confidence, no longer filtered through Nathan's or Diane's expectations. My creative voice, speaking clearly again after years of being muffled. My personal style, quirky and imperfect and completely mine. My financial autonomy, hard-won through confronting Nathan's betrayal. My support network, stronger and more vital than I'd realized. My capacity for resilience, tested by fire and proven unbreakable. My authentic self, neither diminished by betrayal nor defined by it, but emerging stronger through it. As I wrote, I realized that these discoveries weren't just silver linings to a painful experience. They were transformative revelations that would shape the rest of my life. In trying to break me, Nathan and Diane had inadvertently helped me find strengths I hadn't known I possessed and reclaim aspects of myself I'd nearly forgotten. "You never deserved him anyway," Diane had said, intending to wound me to my core. Looking at my list of unexpected gifts born from that painful dismissal, I had to smile at the irony. For once in her life, Diane Winters had been absolutely right, just not in the way she had intended. I didn't deserve a relationship built on compromise and conditional acceptance. I didn't deserve a life measured against someone else's yardstick of success. I didn't deserve to shrink myself to fit into spaces too small for my spirit. What I deserved was the chance to build something authentic and meaningful on my own terms. And now, against all odds, that's exactly what I had been given. "You're doing what?" Zoe stared at me across the studio as if I'd just announced I was joining a circus. "I'm accepting a commercial wedding photography grant to document rural ceremonies in my hometown for 3 weeks this summer," I repeated, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "The Barrett Foundation is funding it, full expenses paid, plus a stipend, and they're publishing the collection in their annual arts journal." "But what about the studio, the Meridian Tech campaign, the Westfield follow-up shoots?" Sigh. Concern was understandable. As my business manager, a promotion I'd given her last week, Zoe was thinking of our existing commitments. "That's why I'm telling you now, even though the trip isn't until July," I explained. "We have 4 months to prepare. Brady is ready for more responsibility, and with his background in commercial photography, he can handle the Meridian shoots. You'll oversee everything, and I'll be available remotely for consultations." I moved to the whiteboard where we tracked upcoming projects and began rearranging our schedule. "Before I leave, we'll complete the Johnson wedding, the Meridian executive portraits, and the initial Westfield concepts. The rest can be managed by the team with remote input from me." Zoe studied the board, her initial panic giving way to thoughtful consideration. "It could work," she admitted. "Brady has been impressive lately, and the summer is typically slower for corporate clients anyway." She turned to me with a curious expression. "But why now? And why your hometown? You never talk about that place." I set down the marker and leaned against the desk. "Because it's time to reconnect with my roots. After everything that's happened, I've been thinking a lot about who I was before Nathan, before trying to fit into Diane's world. Part of that person was shaped by growing up in Pinecrest. What I didn't say was that the call from the Barrett Foundation had come the day after I'd discovered the deed to a small property in Pinecrest among the documents in Nathan's safe. According to county records, it was a modest cabin by the lake that had belonged to my grandmother, a place I'd loved as a child but had assumed was sold after her death. Somehow, Nathan had tracked it down and purchased it in my name early in our marriage, never mentioning it. It felt like a sign, a thread connecting my past to my future in a way I couldn't ignore. Plus, I added with a grin, I already pitched the studio succession plan in my grant application. The foundation was impressed by our business model and how we're developing new talent. This project could open doors for all of us. Zoe's expression shifted from concern to excitement. "You're really thinking of us as a team, aren't you? Not just your employees." "We are a team," I confirmed. The studio wouldn't have survived these past weeks without you and Brady stepping up. This is as much your success as it is mine. Later that day, I found myself sitting in a small cafe with Vivian, reviewing the final details of Nathan's settlement offer. The papers spread between us represented the formal conclusion to 7 years of marriage, reduced to legal language and financial calculations. His attorney accepted the therapy clause without much pushback, Vivian noted, highlighting a section of the document. Nathan apparently said he'd already started seeing someone. Good for him, I said, and meant it. Whatever Nathan had done, whatever pain he had caused, I couldn't wish more suffering upon him. That would only extend the cycle of hurt. The full financial transfer has been completed, Vivian continued. Your half of the joint account funds are now in your personal account, along with the additional settlement amount. The fraudulent credit line has been paid off and closed. The apartment will be sold, with proceeds split equally. I nodded, scanning the numbers that represented the practical dismantling of a shared life. And the confidentiality clause? Standard language. You can't discuss the specific circumstances of your separation or Nathan's financial activities with media or in public forums. Private conversations with friends, family, or therapists are excluded. Vivian looked up. It doesn't prevent you from acknowledging the divorce itself, just the details of how it happened. That seems reasonable, I agreed. Part of me had wondered if I should fight harder, demand more, ensure Nathan and Diane faced more significant consequences for what they'd done. But another part, the part that was growing stronger each day, recognized that moving forward required closing certain doors firmly behind me. Once you sign, we file with the court, Vivian explained. Given the agreement on all terms, the divorce should be finalized within 90 days. No court appearances necessary. I picked up the pen, hesitating briefly over the signature line. There was a finality to this moment, a formal acknowledgement that a chapter of my life was ending. The weight of it wasn't lost on me. Any second thoughts? Vivian asked, noticing my pause. I shook my head. No second thoughts, just recognizing the significance of the moment. With steady hands, I signed my name, Rachel Bennett, not Rachel Winters, on each indicated line. The name I'd been born with, the name I'd build my business under, the name I would carry forward. Congratulations, Vivian said as she gathered the signed documents. I know that sounds strange for a divorce, but you've navigated an incredibly difficult situation with grace and strength. You should be proud of yourself. Thank you, I replied, surprised by the lightness I felt. Not just for the kind words, but for everything you've done these past weeks. You were a lifeline when I needed one most. Over coffee, our conversation shifted from legal matters to more personal ones. I found myself telling Vivian about the photography grant, the property in Pinecrest, my plans for expanding the studio. It sounds like you're not just rebuilding, but reimagining your life, she observed. That's rare after the kind of betrayal you experienced. Many people get stuck in anger or fear. I still have those moments, I admitted. Days when I wake up furious all over again, or when something reminds me of Nathan and it hurts like it just happened. But then I remember that staying in that place only gives him and Diane continued power over my life. Vivian nodded thoughtfully. That's wisdom that usually takes people years to achieve if they reach it at all. I laughed softly. I'm not sure it's wisdom so much as survival instinct. I refuse to let what they did define the rest of my story. As we parted ways, Vivian gave me a warm hug, crossing the line from attorney-client to something closer to friendship. Keep in touch, Rachel. I want to see where this next chapter takes you. That evening, as spring twilight settled over the city, I found myself walking through Monarch Park, where Nathan and I had often strolled on Sunday afternoons. It had been his favorite park, centrally located and meticulously maintained, the perfect place to run into colleagues and friends accidentally. Now I viewed it with fresh eyes, noticing the community garden I'd never paid attention to before. The small amphitheater where a group of teenagers was practicing a dance routine, the quiet reading nook beneath a sprawling oak tree where an elderly man sat with his dog. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. "How did it go with the lawyer? Official yet?" "Signed and filed," I replied. 90 days to freedom. Her response came quickly. "Champagne tonight? We should celebrate." I smiled, about to accept, when another text appeared. This one from a number I didn't immediately recognize. "Rachel, it's Diana from the community center. The teens loved your photography workshop last week. They're asking if you might come back and do another session on portrait lighting. No pressure, but they're quite persistent." The text reminded me of the volunteer work I'd started recently, teaching basic photography skills to teenagers at a local community center. It had been Ellie's suggestion, a way to give back while moving forward. And I'd been surprised by how fulfilling it was to share my passion with young people who might not otherwise have access to arts education. "Rain check on champagne?" I texted Ellie. "Community center kids want another workshop. Tomorrow instead?" "Even better," she replied. "Go inspire some future Ansel Adamses." As I changed direction, heading toward the community center instead of home, I marveled at how differently I was spending my time now. Friday evenings during my marriage had been dedicated to Nathan's world. Cocktail parties with colleagues, charity galas with Diane's friends, carefully orchestrated dinners where conversations revolved around investment portfolios and vacation properties. Now I was choosing connections that nourished rather than drained me. Teaching eager teenagers. Having honest conversations with friends like Ellie who accepted me fully. Building a business team based on mutual respect and shared goals. Even my cordial professional relationship with Vivian felt more authentic than many of the so-called friendships I'd cultivated in Nathan's social circle. The community center was housed in a converted warehouse, its industrial exterior brightened by colorful murals painted by local artists. Inside, the space hummed with activity. A basketball game in the main hall, a cooking class in the kitchen area, a homework help session in the corner library. Diana, the arts program coordinator, waved me over with a relieved smile. "You got my message. I wasn't sure you'd be available on such short notice." "Happy to help," I said, following her to the small studio space where I'd taught the previous workshop. "What are they struggling with specifically?" "They're trying to take portraits for a community project, but the lighting in their photos is..." She grimaced. "Well, see for yourself." She handed me a tablet displaying a series of well-composed, but poorly lit photographs, subjects with harsh shadows across their faces, overexposed backgrounds, or too dark features that lost all detail. Inside the studio, 6 teenagers looked up expectantly as I entered, the same group from last week's basic composition workshop. Their faces lit up with recognition. "Ms. Bennett, you came!" Josie, a passionate 16-year-old with dreams of becoming a photojournalist, jumped up from her chair. "We tried what you showed us about composition, but our portraits still look terrible." "Lighting is one of the trickiest elements to master," I assured them, setting down my bag and pulling out a small portable light kit I'd brought just in case. "But once you understand a few basic principles, you'll see immediate improvement." For the next 2 hours, I lost myself in teaching, demonstrating how to use reflectors to soften harsh shadows, explaining the difference between hard and soft light, showing them how to position subjects for the most flattering natural light. Their enthusiasm was contagious, their questions thoughtful, their progress visible with each new attempt. As they practiced on each other, I circulated, offering gentle corrections and encouragement. When Marcos, the quietest of the group, showed me a perfectly lit portrait he'd taken of Josie, the pride in his eyes reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with photography in the first place. That moment when technical knowledge and creative vision aligned to create something powerful. "This is frame-worthy," I told him honestly. You've captured something essential about Josie here, not just what she looks like, but who she is. He beamed, then looked suddenly uncertain. How do you know when a photo is really good? Not just technically, but important? The question caught me off guard with its depth. I considered it carefully before answering, aware that all 6 students were now listening intently. The best photographs create a bridge of understanding, I said finally. They connect the viewer to the subject in a way that expands our capacity for empathy or recognition. They help us see something, or someone, differently than we did before. The words had come from somewhere deep within me, a distillation of everything I believed about my art form. As I spoke them aloud, I realized they applied not just to photography, but to life itself, to the connections we form, the understanding we build, the bridges we create between our experiences and others. In the weeks since Nathan's betrayal, I had been constructing such bridges between my past and present selves, between pain and healing, between the life I had lost and the one I was creating. Each relationship I was nurturing or rebuilding, each new project I was undertaking, each choice I was making for myself rather than to please others, these were all bridges carrying me forward. As the workshop wrapped up and the teens headed home, Diana helped me pack up my equipment. Whatever you said to them at the end there, she commented. It hit home. I've never seen them so thoughtful and focused. I smiled, slinging my camera bag over my shoulder. They taught me as much as I taught them today. Outside, the spring evening had deepened into early darkness, the park across the street illuminated by antique-style lampposts. As I walked toward the subway station, I felt a sense of contentment that had nothing to do with material success or social standing, the metrics by which Nathan and Diane had always measured worth. My phone buzzed with a new email notification from the Barrett Foundation, confirming the grant and requesting a preliminary outline for the rural wedding photography project. I paused under a streetlight to read it, smiling at their enthusiasm for what they called my unique vision and authentic approach. As I slipped my phone back into my pocket, I realized I was standing directly across from the restaurant where Nathan had proposed 7 years ago. Through the large windows, I could see couples dining, unaware of the significance this place held in my personal history. For a moment, I was tempted to feel sad or nostalgic. Instead, I found myself wishing them well, those strangers enjoying their meals, building their own stories, creating their own connections. Some of those relationships would endure, others would end painfully, but each would shape the people involved in ways they couldn't yet imagine. My own painful ending had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed and clarity I might never have achieved otherwise. As difficult as the journey had been, I couldn't wish it undone, for that would mean unwishing the person I was becoming because of it. You never deserved him anyway, Diane had declared, intending to diminish me. Standing under the streetlight, watching the world continue its endless dance of connection and separation, I finally understood the complete truth of her statement. I hadn't deserved Nathan, not the betrayal, certainly, but also not the subtle compromises, the gradual erosion of self, the conditional acceptance that had characterized our relationship even in its best moments. What I deserved, what everyone deserved, was the chance to be fully, authentically themselves within their relationships, not despite them. To build bridges of understanding that expanded rather than contracted their worlds. To connect with others in ways that fostered growth rather than constraint. As I continued my walk toward the subway, I felt a deep gratitude for this hard-won wisdom and for all the bridges, to myself, to others, to my art, that I was now free to build on my own terms. The real estate agent's SUV bounced along the unpaved road, tall pines crowding close on either side. Through the open window, I breathed in the scent of sun-warmed forest, a fragrance that transported me instantly back to childhood summers. It's just around this bend, Marjorie, the agent, said as she navigated a particularly rutted section of road. I haven't been out here in years. Not many properties change hands in this area. Most families pass them down through generations. As we rounded the curve, the trees opened up to reveal a small clearing, and there it was, my grandmother's cabin. The sight of it caught in my throat, so familiar yet changed by the passage of time. The weathered logs had darkened with age. The front porch sagged slightly at one corner, and the garden my grandmother had tended so lovingly was now a tangle of wild growth. But the essence of the place remained, sturdy and welcoming, a haven set against the backdrop of pines with the glimmer of lake water visible beyond. It needs work, Marjorie commented as we parked. Been empty for a few years from the looks of it. I nodded, but I wasn't really listening. I was already out of the car, drawn toward the cabin by an invisible thread of memory and belonging. The key, found among the documents in Nathan's safe, felt warm in my palm as I climbed the 3 wooden steps to the porch. The door opened with a familiar creak, releasing the scent of cedar and dust, and something indefinably nostalgic. Sunlight streamed through grimy windows, illuminating floating moats and casting golden rectangles across the plank floor. The main room was just as I remembered, stone fireplace dominating one wall, built-in bookshelves still holding a few forgotten novels, the old kitchen with its hand-pump sink at the far end. Whoever closed it up did a decent job, Marjorie observed, running a finger along a windowsill. No major water damage or pest problems that I can see. Mostly just needs a good cleaning, maybe some updating of the electrical and plumbing. I moved through the space in a dreamlike state, touching surfaces my grandmother had touched, seeing ghosts of family gatherings in every corner. The small bedroom where I'd slept as a child still held the iron frame bed, now stripped to the bare mattress. The screened porch that overlooked the lake had weathered badly but remained structurally sound. "What do you think?" Marjorie asked. "Is it what you remembered?" "It's perfect," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "It needs work, but it's exactly what I want." She looked doubtful. "You sure? There are much more modern properties available closer to town with all the amenities." I shook my head, running my hand along the smooth wooden counter my grandfather had crafted by hand. "This place has history. My history. I can update the utilities without changing its character." As Marjorie went outside to make a call where she could get better reception, I wandered back to the main room and opened the French doors that led to a small deck overlooking the lake. The view stole my breath. Afternoon sun turning the water to hammered gold. The distant shore, a dark line of pines. This view had been the backdrop for so many formative moments in my life. Learning to swim, reading my first photography book, having deep conversations with my grandmother about art and purpose. Standing there, I could almost hear her voice. "Find what makes your soul sing, Rachel, and follow that song wherever it leads you." I'd followed it to photography, to art school, to building my business. But somewhere along the way, amid the pursuit of success and Nathan's approval and Diane's acceptance, I'd stopped listening to that inner music. Coming back here felt like finding the melody again, clear and true beneath the noise of the past. 7 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How's the cabin? Wilderness paradise or horror movie setting?" I smiled, snapping a quick photo of the view and sending it back with the caption, "Definitely paradise. Needs work, but I'm in love." Her response came quickly. "OMG, gorgeous! Perfect artist retreat. When can the team visit?" The question made me pause. During my marriage, I'd kept my professional and personal lives carefully separated, partly because Nathan had always been dismissive of my work friends, as he called them, and partly because I'd internalized Diane's rigid ideas about appropriate social boundaries. Now, the thought of having Zoe, Brady, and the rest of my team up to the cabin for a weekend retreat seemed not just possible but wonderful. The cabin had always been a place of gathering and connection. It deserved to be filled with creative energy and laughter again. Summer studio retreat officially planned, I texted back, after the renovation. When Marjorie returned, I spent the next hour walking the property with her, making notes about necessary repairs and potential improvements. The cabin sat on 3 acres, with 200 feet of lake frontage and an old dock in need of rebuilding. The structure itself was sound, but would need updated wiring, plumbing, and a new roof. I can recommend some local contractors, Marjorie offered as we got back into her SUV. People who understand these old places and won't try to turn it into some modern monstrosity. That would be great, I said. I want to preserve its character while making it functional for year-round use. Year-round? She asked, surprised. I thought this was just a summer place for you. I hesitated, not sure how to explain the pull I felt toward this place, the sense that it represented a part of my life I needed to reclaim. I'm not sure yet, but I want the option. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. Back in Emptied, the city, I finalized the divorce papers with Vivian, officially ending my marriage with the same signature that had begun it 7 years earlier. The studio thrived under the new management structure, with Zoe handling client relations and business operations while I focused on creative direction and photography. Plans for the Barrett Foundation grant project took shape, with a schedule of rural weddings to document throughout the summer. And in every spare moment, I researched cabin renovations, consulted with contractors by phone, and began designing the space that would become my retreat, and possibly, someday, much more. You're really serious about this place? Ellie commented one evening as she helped me sort through furniture websites, looking for pieces that would complement the cabin's rustic character without sacrificing comfort. More serious than I expected. To be? I admitted. When I first found out Nathan had bought it for me, I thought I'd just sell it. Too many complicated emotions attached. But being there, it felt like coming home in a way that no place has in years. Even with all the work it needs? Maybe because of that, I said, trying to articulate the feeling. It's like the cabin is in the process of becoming its next version, just like I am. We're renovating together. Ellie smiled, nudging my shoulder affectionately. That might be the most Rachel Bennett thing you've ever said. Philosophical about home improvement. I laughed, but the observation struck a chord. I was becoming more recognizably myself with each passing day, rediscovering old passions, exploring new directions, making decisions based on my own values, rather than someone else's expectations. The woman who had once desperate tried to fit into Nathan and Diane's world now seemed like a stranger, an uncomfortable costume I'd worn for too long. The divorce became final on a Tuesday in late June, 90 days after filing, just as Vivian had predicted. I received the notification while at the studio, in the middle of editing a corporate campaign for Meridian Tech. There was no drama, no emotional collapse, just a simple email confirming that legally I was no longer Rachel Winters. I had expected to feel something more momentous, grief or relief, or some complex mixture of the two. Instead, I felt a quiet certainty that this formal ending was merely acknowledging what I had already processed emotionally weeks before. That evening, as I parked outside the community center for my weekly photography workshop with the teens, I spotted a familiar figure waiting by the entrance, Diane. My stomach tightened at the sight of her, impeccably dressed as always in a tailored beige suit, her silver hair arranged in its customary perfect coiffure. For a moment, I considered turning around, avoiding the confrontation. But that would mean disappointing the teenagers waiting inside, and I refused to give Diane that power over me any longer. As I approached, she straightened, her expression unreadable. "Rachel." "Diane," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "This is unexpected. I waited here because I didn't want to make a scene inside, she said stiffly. I understand you're teaching a class. Yes, photography for teenagers, something I care deeply about. She nodded, glancing at the building. Nathan told me the divorce was finalized today. It was, I confirmed, wondering where this conversation was heading. Diane seemed uncharacteristically uncertain. Her normal, imperious confidence dimmed. I came to return something that belongs to you, she said finally, reaching into her designer handbag and withdrawing a small velvet-covered box. I recognized it immediately, the vintage Art Deco sapphire earrings that had belonged to my mother, a family heirloom I'd thought lost during our last move. I'd worn them on my wedding day as my something blue. I found these while organizing some of Nathan's things, Diane explained, holding out the box. They were in a drawer at my house. I believe they have sentimental value to you. I took the box carefully, opening it to confirm that the earrings were indeed mine. Tiny sapphires surrounded by delicate filigree silver work, exactly as I remembered. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. These were my mother's. I thought they were gone forever. Diane nodded, her expression softening slightly. Family heirlooms should stay in the family. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of our complicated history hanging between us. Part of me wanted to walk away, to end this unexpected encounter without further engagement. But another part, the part that had been working on building bridges of understanding, felt compelled to reach for closure. How is Nathan? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Something flashed across Diane's face. Pain, perhaps, or worry. He's finding his way. The therapy seems to be helping. He's moved into his own place, started reconnecting with old friends I never approved of. A hint of a rueful smile touched her lips. He even adopted a dog from the shelter despite my warnings about the mess and responsibility. The image of Nathan, fastidious, controlled Nathan, with a shelter dog was so unexpected that I couldn't help but smile. Good for him. Diane studied me for a moment, then said with evident difficulty, I owe you an apology, Rachel. What I said that day, that you never deserved him. It was cruel and untrue. The admission took my breath away. In all, the years I'd known Diane, I had never once heard her apologize for anything. The truth is, she continued, Nathan was lucky to have someone who loved him for himself, not for his family name or his potential. Someone who encouraged his better nature rather than his worst impulses. That someone was you, not me. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, revealing a vulnerability I'd never witnessed in her before. It was a startling glimpse behind the perfect facade she had maintained for so long. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, she admitted. But Nathan's therapist suggested that making amends is important for his healing process, and perhaps for mine as well. I nodded, understanding the courage it had taken for someone like Diane to seek me out, to humble herself with an apology. I hope you both find peace, Diane. Despite everything, I don't wish either of you ill. She straightened, some of her usual poise returning. You're very generous. More than I deserve. She glanced at her watch. I should let you get to your class. They're waiting for you. As she turned to leave, I felt a sudden impulse to offer something in return for her unexpected gesture of grace. Diane, I called after her. She paused, looking back questioningly. For what it's worth, I think you raised a son who's capable of change, of growth. That's not nothing. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Thank you for that. She hesitated, then added, Be well, Rachel, before walking to her waiting Mercedes. I watched her drive away, the velvet box warm in my hand. The encounter had been brief but profound, a closing of a circle. An unexpected moment of mutual recognition between two women who had viewed each other as adversaries for so long. Inside the community center, the teens were already setting up for our portrait session, arranging lighting, equipment with growing confidence. "Sorry I'm late," I said, slipping my bag off my shoulder. "I ran into someone from my past." "Everything okay, Ms. Bennett?" Josie asked, noticing something in my expression. I smiled, tucking the velvet box safely into my bag. "Yes, everything's exactly as it should be." The session that evening focused on environmental portraiture, capturing subjects in contexts that revealed something about their personalities and lives. As the teens photographed each other in various settings around the community center, I found myself reflecting on how environment shapes identity, how the places we inhabit and the people we surround ourselves with influence who we become. For 7 years, I had inhabited Nathan's world, allowing his environment and his mother's expectations to reshape me. Now I was creating my own environment, the thriving studio with its collaborative team, the cabin in the woods that connected me to my roots, this community center where I shared my passion with eager young minds. "Ms. Bennett, look at this one." Marcos called me over to review an image he'd captured of Josie in the center's small library, surrounded by books, her expression intent as she examined a volume of black and white photography. The photograph was excellent, technically sound, with good composition and lighting. But what struck me most was how perfectly Marcos had captured Josie's essence, her curiosity, her intensity, her hunger for knowledge. "This is who she is," I said approvingly. "You've seen her, not just looked at her." Marcos beamed at the praise. "That's what you taught us, right? To really see our subjects." I nodded, thinking how many years it had taken me to relearn that lesson in my own life, to really see myself and others, to recognize authentic connections, to distinguish between genuine acceptance and conditional approval. As the workshop wound down and the teens packed up their equipment, Diana approached me with a manila envelope. "This came for you at the main office," she said. "Looks official." The envelope bore the Barrett Foundation logo in the corner. Inside was the finalized contract for the Rural Wedding Photography Grant, along with a check for the first installment of the project funding. Reading through the details, I felt a surge of excitement. The project would begin in just 3 weeks, coinciding perfectly with the initial renovations at the cabin, which would serve as my home base during the documentation process. Diana peered over my shoulder at the grant documents. "This is a big deal, isn't it? National exposure for your work." "It is," I agreed. "But it's more than that. It's a chance to tell stories that don't often get told, to show that love and commitment and celebration happen everywhere, not just in expensive venues with designer dresses." She smiled knowingly. "Sounds like there's a personal element to this project for you." I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. In documenting these rural weddings, these celebrations that would never be featured in glossy magazines or social media influencer accounts, I was in some way reclaiming the authentic value of connection from the superficial trappings that had surrounded my own marriage. "I guess there is," I acknowledged. "It's about recognizing that what matters in a relationship isn't the external validation or the perfect appearance. It's about seeing each other clearly and choosing each other anyway." Later that night, in my small apartment, I carefully placed my mother's sapphire earrings in my jewelry box, alongside the pendant my grandmother had given me and the silver bangles I'd made in that metalworking class years ago. Each piece represented a different facet of my identity, a different chapter in my story. My phone chimed with an email notification, photos from the contractor at the cabin, showing the progress on the roof repairs. The old damaged shingles had been stripped away, revealing the solid wooden structure beneath. By next week, new cedar shakes would be in place, protecting the cabin for decades to come. There was something profoundly metaphorical about the renovation process, stripping away what was damaged, reinforcing the strong core, rebuilding with materials that would last. It mirrored my own transformation over these past months, the careful dismantling of unhealthy patterns and the thoughtful construction of a more authentic life. As I scrolled through the photos, noting details to discuss with the contractor, a text from Ellie appeared. Divorce day. You okay? More than okay, I replied truthfully. Working on cabin plans, finalizing grant project, had surprisingly positive encounter with Diane. Life feels right. Diane? Ellie responded immediately. Need details. I smiled, promising to fill her in tomorrow over coffee. Setting my phone aside, I turned to my desk where the self-portrait I'd taken with my father's Leica now stood framed. The woman in transition, balanced between shadow and light. Beside it, I placed a new image, a photograph of the cabin taken. During my visit, the golden light of afternoon illuminating its weathered surfaces, the lake gleaming in the background. These two images, the woman and the cabin, represented my past and future in conversation with each other. Both were works in progress, both contained elements of what had been and hints of what could be. You never deserved him anyway, Diane I had said on that terrible morning that now seemed like a lifetime ago. Looking at these images, at the evidence of my journey and the promise of what lay ahead, I felt nothing but gratitude for that painful awakening. She had been right, though not in the way she'd intended. I hadn't deserved the limitations of that relationship, the compromises it had demanded, the gradual erosion of my authentic self. What I deserved, what everyone deserves, was the chance to build a life that honors their true nature and nurtures their highest potential. Not a life defined by someone else's expectations or validations, but one crafted with intention and integrity, embracing both the shadows and the light. As I prepared for bed, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow with a sense of genuine anticipation. Not because anything extraordinary was scheduled to happen, but because ordinary life itself had become extraordinary, infused with purpose, connection, and the ongoing adventure of becoming more fully myself with each passing day. 1 year later, I stood on the renovated dock of my grandmother's cabin, my cabin now, watching the sunset paint the lake in strokes of amber and rose. A gentle summer breeze rustled the pines, carrying the scent of water and woods and the distant aroma of the welcome dinner cooking on the new deck. Behind me, laughter and conversation drifted from the cabin where my team was setting up for our annual retreat. Through the wide windows, I could see Zoe arranging platters of local cheese and fruit, while Brady mixed drinks at the small bar we'd installed in the renovated kitchen. The new studio intern, Miguel, was hanging strings of vintage-style lights along the deck railings, transforming the space for the evening ahead. The past 12 months had been a journey of transformation, both for the cabin and for me. The renovation had been more extensive than initially planned, not just updated, utilities and a new roof, but a complete reimagining of the space to serve as both retreat and part-time. We'd expanded the main room to create a wall of windows overlooking the lake, converted the old screened porch into a studio space flooded with natural light, and added a small guest cottage where the dilapidated tool shed had stood. The result was a perfect blend of old and new. The cabin's original character preserved in its hand-hewn beams and stone fireplace, while modern elements provided comfort and functionality. Like me, it had emerged from its renovation both familiar and completely transformed. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Ellie. On our way, ETA 30 minutes. Tyler keeps stopping to take photos of real countryside. City boy. I smiled, picturing Ellie's new boyfriend, a graphic designer she'd met through one of my corporate clients, marveling at the rural landscape. It would be his first visit to the cabin, and I was curious to see it through his fresh eyes. The Barrett Foundation project had exceeded all expectations, resulting in a collection of wedding photographs that captured the authentic heart of rural celebrations, from a lakeside ceremony where the bride and groom had arrived by fishing. boat to a barn wedding where 4 generations had danced together under strings of homemade paper lanterns. The foundation had extended the grant for a second year, expanding the scope to include other life celebrations, births, anniversaries, graduations that formed the emotional fabric of small-town communities. The work had reconnected me with my roots while simultaneously pushing my artistic boundaries. Several images from the collection had won regional photography awards, and a major gallery in the city had approached me about a showing in the fall. Professionally, Rachel Bennett photography had evolved as well. We'd outgrown the original studio space, moving to a larger location that included a gallery area for showcasing our work. Zoe had officially become a partner in the business, bringing her organizational genius and client relationship skills into a more formal leadership role. Brady now headed our growing commercial division, while I focused on creative direction and special projects. The expansion had been funded entirely through our own success. No loans, no outside investors, just the steady growth of a business built on authentic vision and collaborative spirit. The financial independence this represented felt particularly significant after the vulnerability I'd experienced when Nathan had emptied our joint account. Footsteps on the dock interrupted my reflections. I turned to find Diana, the community Center Arts Coordinator, approaching with a bottle of wine. "This view is even more spectacular than you described," she said, handing me the bottle. "Thank you for including me this weekend." "I'm glad you could make it," I replied sincerely. Diana had become a friend over the past year, our shared passion for arts education creating a bond that extended beyond the weekly workshops. When I'd mentioned the team retreat, it had felt natural to include her. "The teens are still talking about that photography exhibition you helped them put together," she said as we walked back toward the cabin. "3 of them are applying to art schools now, including Marcos. His parents never thought that was possible." Pride warmed me at the news. The exhibition, a series of environmental portraits documenting the diverse community around the center, had been a turning point for several of the young photographers. Seeing their work professionally displayed, witnessing the impact their images had on viewers, had transformed their perception of what was possible for their futures. "Speaking of exhibitions," Diana continued, "have you decided which pieces you'll include in your gallery show?" "I think so," I said as we climbed the steps to the deck. "Mainly images from the Barrett project, but also some more personal work, the self-portraits I've been experimenting with, and a few studies of the cabin through the seasons." The self-portraits had begun as a private project, a visual journal documenting my evolution over the past year. Unlike traditional portraits focused on appearance, these images explored identity through metaphor and environment. My hands cradling, my grandmother's teacup, my silhouette against the lake at dawn, my reflection fragmented in a series of antique mirrors I'd collected during the renovation. The decision to include these more vulnerable, personal images in a public exhibition had come gradually, as I'd grown more comfortable with being seen, truly seen, without the careful filters and boundaries I'd maintained during my marriage. Inside the cabin, final preparations for the evening were underway. The large farm table that dominated the main room was set for 12. My team, their partners, and the small circle of friends who had supported me through the past year's journey. The stone fireplace held a small fire despite the summer evening, its crackling presence a nod to tradition and continuity. "Rachel," Zoe called from the kitchen. "Can you check if this seasoning is right for the pasta? I'm trying to recreate that dish from the Italian place you love." As I moved to help, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number with the city's area code. Stepping onto the quiet side deck, I answered cautiously. "Rachel Bennett speaking." "Rachel, it's Nathan." The voice I hadn't heard in nearly 6 months sent a jolt of surprise through me. Our communication since the divorce had been minimal and mostly through attorneys, a few necessary exchanges about property matters or tax issues related to our former marriage. "Nathan," I acknowledged, keeping my tone neutral. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, Everything's fine, he assured me quickly. I'm sorry to call out of the blue. I know you're probably busy. Actually, I am, I said, watching a boat cut across the golden path the setting sun had laid upon the water. I'm hosting a dinner for my team at the cabin. The cabin, he repeated, a note of wistfulness in his voice. How did the renovation turn out? Beautifully, I said. It feels like home. There was a pause before he continued. I'm glad. That's partly why I'm calling, actually. I found some old photographs of the place from when I first purchased it. They were mixed in with some papers from my grandfather's estate. I thought you might want them for your renovation documentation. The thoughtfulness of the gesture surprised me. Yes, I would. Thank you. I can have them couriered to your studio next week, he offered. That would be perfect. Another pause, longer this time. There's something else, Rachel. I wanted to tell you before you hear it elsewhere. I'm moving to Seattle next month for a new position, a smaller firm focused on sustainable investments. The news was unexpected, but somehow not surprising. Nathan had been making significant changes in his life, according to the occasional updates I received from mutual acquaintances. Therapy, new friendships, different priorities. That sounds like a good opportunity, I said sincerely. A fresh start. It is, he agreed. And it's because of you, in a way. That day at Thornton's, when you confronted me about the questionable investment, it forced me to really look at the ethical implications of my work, at the type of person I was becoming. I hadn't expected this conversation to turn so personal, and I wasn't sure how to respond. I'm not telling you this to burden you or to seek forgiveness, Nathan continued, seeming to sense my hesitation. I just wanted you to know that despite how badly I hurt you, something positive came from our time together, at least for me. The honesty in his voice touched me. Not in a way that reopened old wounds or stirred dormant feelings, but as a confirmation that growth was possible even from the most painful experiences. I'm glad to hear that, Nathan. I mean it. He cleared his throat. Well, I won't keep you from your guests. I just wanted to let you know about the photos and the move. Thank you for calling, I said. And Nathan, I wish you well in Seattle. I really do. After we hung up, I remained on the deck for a moment, absorbing the unexpected interaction. A year ago, a call from Nathan would have thrown me into emotional turmoil. Now it felt like a conversation with someone from a distant chapter of my life, significant in the role he had played in my story, but no longer holding power over my present or future. The sound of car tires on gravel announced new arrivals. I watched as Ellie's distinctive red hatchback pulled up, followed by Vivian's sleek sedan. My friends had arrived, completing our gathering. As I moved to greet them, I caught sight of my reflection in the cabin's windows. Backlit by the setting sun, standing tall against the backdrop of the lake and forest, surrounded by the home I had created. The image struck me as a perfect visual, metaphor for where I now stood in life, defined not by what had been taken from me, but by what I had built in its place. Ellie bounded up the steps, wrapping me in a quick hug before gesturing to the tall man following behind her. Rachel, this is Tyler. Tyler, this is Rachel, the photography genius and cabin renovator extraordinaire I've been telling you about. The place is amazing, Tyler said, shaking my hand. Those windows with the lake view, architect's dream right there. Vivian approached next, looking relaxed and casual in jeans and a silk blouse, a far cry from her courtroom attire. Happy. Cabinversary, she said with a smile, handing me a gift bag. 1 year since you reclaimed your space. Inside the bag was a beautiful leather-bound journal with handmade paper, perfect for planning my upcoming exhibition. The thoughtfulness of the gift, so aligned with my current projects and passions, highlighted how well my friends now knew the real me, not the carefully curated version I'd presented during my marriage. As everyone settled into the warm, light-filled space, helping themselves to drinks and appetizers, I took a moment to observe the scene. These people, my team, my friends, my chosen family, were here because of genuine connection, not social obligation or strategic networking. They knew my strengths and vulnerabilities, my successes and struggles, and valued me for my authentic self, not for how well I performed a prescribed role. "Speech! Speech!" Brady called out, raising his glass as everyone found seats around, the long table laden with food. I hadn't planned to make formal remarks, but standing at the head of the table, looking at these faces that had become so dear to me over the past year, words came naturally. A year ago, I thought I was starting. Over from scratch, I began. I'd lost my home, my marriage, my financial security, everything that had defined my life for 7 years. What I didn't realize then was that I wasn't starting from nothing. I was starting from a much more solid foundation: my creativity, my resilience, my capacity for genuine connection. I gestured to the renovated cabin around us. This place represents that journey for me. We didn't tear it down and start over. We built upon what was solid and true, while replacing what was damaged or no longer serving its purpose. We honored its history while creating space for new possibilities. Lifting my glass, I continued. So tonight, I want to toast not just to new beginnings, but to the strength it takes to create them, and to the people who help us discover that strength within ourselves. As glasses clinked and conversation resumed, I took my seat, filled with a profound sense of gratitude. The path that had brought me here had not been easy or straight, but every difficult step had led me closer to this moment of wholeness and belonging. Outside, the last light of day faded from the sky, stars beginning to emerge above the dark silhouettes of the pines. Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth and laughter, a beacon of welcome in the gathering dusk. "You never deserved him anyway," Diane had declared on that terrible morning that now seemed to belong to another lifetime. Looking around at the beautiful life I had created, a thriving business built on authentic passion, meaningful work that made a difference in young lives, a home that honored my past while embracing my future, relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care, I knew with absolute certainty that she had been right. I deserved this. All of it. Not despite the pain and betrayal that had initially set me on this path, but in some ways because of it. For it was through that darkest moment that I had finally found the courage to step fully into the light of my own possibilities, to become not the person someone else needed me to be, but the person I was always meant to become. And that, I now understood, was the most valuable thing anyone could ever deserve: the chance to become completely, authentically themselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.